It's nice to have you back. For decades, people have argued over whether Bigfoot is nothing more than a myth or something that's been hiding in the wilderness all along. But every so often, a new piece of footage surfaces that's so unusually clear, it leaves even the biggest skeptics questioning what they just saw. Join me as we break down the newest Bigfoot videos that are so convincing, they just might make you believe. The timestamp blinks 2:14 a.m. in the lower corner of camera 3's frame, and for the first 4 seconds of the clip, there is nothing. Just ponderosa pines at the edge of the motion zone, wet bark catching the infrared, a thin ground fog sitting low across the basin floor. Then the left edge of the frame shifts. Something moves into it from the tree line, and the word that hits me before any conscious thought is enormous. Not bear enormous, not elk enormous, something else entirely. Something that walks upright with the casual authority of a thing that has never once been afraid of what lives in the dark with it. Bigfoot moves through camera 3's field of view like the woods belong to it personally, and the mule deer carcass hanging from its right hand swings like a suitcase, not draped across its shoulders, not cradled, gripped by one rear leg, dangling, the animal's dead weight pulling toward the earth while Bigfoot barely registers the resistance. The deer is big. Later, I estimate a mature doe, probably 140 to 160 pounds field-dressed, and it bounces against the mud with every stride, leaving a trench in the soft ground nearly 8 inches deep that I can make out clearly once daylight hits the same corridor 12 hours later. The shoulder width is extraordinary, at least 36 inches, maybe closer to 40. Far broader than any recorded great ape or human athlete. The arms hang unnaturally long, one carrying the deer, the other swinging with slow, deliberate confidence. The fur is dark, almost black in infrared, wet-looking and matted like it has been forcing through heavy brush. At the 47-yard mark, Bigfoot pauses for 2 seconds, and I can see white breath rising in steady plumes in the cold pre-dawn air. A warm-blooded animal, a very large one, breathing easily under a load that would destroy a person's shoulder. What Bigfoot does not do is stop to eat. The deer is already partially consumed, the ribcage opened somewhere else, but Bigfoot keeps moving. A scavenger would feed there. There is no reason to carry it unless the destination matters more than the meal. The ravine sits 340 yards southwest of camera 3, and that is exactly where Bigfoot goes, without hesitation, without checking, without a single wasted step. There is no wandering in that walk. No exploration. Bigfoot knows where it is going the way I know the path from my truck to my gear locker. By rote, by repetition, by use. Predators kill where it's convenient. What I'm watching here looked like delivery. What happens over the next 10 days will make the first sighting look like a warm-up, because Bigfoot doesn't just come back. Bigfoot comes back every single night, and what it's bringing with it will shatter everything you think you know about apex predator behavior. 3 cameras catch the second visit 48 hours later. The triangulation of all 3 angles gives me something I didn't have before. A complete route. Bigfoot enters from the same tree line corridor every single time, moves along the same bearing, crosses the same low point in the creek, and disappears into the ravine at the same gap between 2 deadfall cedars. The consistency is not the behavior of an animal wandering through its range. It is the behavior of an animal running an established line, the same way a person drives the same road to work every morning without consciously deciding to. The second carcass is a wild hog, a big boar by the look of the tusks, somewhere in the 250-pound range. Bigfoot carries it the same way. One hand, one leg, the body dragging and bouncing, and moves at the same unhurried pace that somehow covers ground faster than it looks like it should. 3 nights after that, a black-tailed deer. Then an elk calf, half-grown, maybe 5 months old, its spotted summer coat still faintly visible in the infrared. 4 separate animals in 10 days, all transported to the same location, none of them consumed on camera, none of them dropped or abandoned partway through. Always at night, always alone, and always toward the ravine. On the 4th recorded visit, the one with the elk calf, Bigfoot does something that stops me cold when I review the footage. At the 60-yard mark from the camera, Bigfoot simply stops, sets the calf down on the ground with a deliberateness that looks almost careful, then turns and walks back 20 yards toward the tree line, stands completely still, and scans the woods in a slow arc that takes nearly 6 full minutes to complete. Not moving, not feeding, just watching. The infrared catches the steam of its breath in slow, regular pulses, and the patience of it is the most unsettling thing I have seen on any of my cameras in 11 years of fieldwork. That 6-minute pause, that's not an animal being cautious. That's an animal running a security check. When Bigfoot is finally satisfied, it returns to the elk calf, picks it back up by the same leg, and continues toward the ravine without hurrying. The whole sequence feels less like wildlife behavior and more like a protocol. That tells me something about the level of intelligence I am dealing with, and it terrifies me accordingly. The rain comes in hard on day 11, a Pacific front that dumps nearly 3 inches across the ridge in under 6 hours and turns every game trail in the basin into a running creek. I almost pull camera 6 that morning because the housing seal has been questionable since September, and I cannot afford to lose another unit to water damage. I decide to leave it. That decision changes everything, because when the front passes and the light comes back in the early afternoon, camera 6 captures the first daylight footage of the ravine floor in the entire 11 weeks the array has been running. And what I see when I pull that card makes me sit down on the tailgate of my truck and stay there for a long time without moving. Bigfoot enters the ravine basin at 2:47 p.m., carrying bones, not a carcass, not a fresh kill. Bones already cleaned to white, long bones from multiple different animals bundled loosely against its chest with one arm, the way a person might carry a load of firewood. The daylight is flat and gray after the rain. Excellent visibility, no infrared grain, no compression artifacts. And for the first time, I can see the ravine itself clearly in the background as Bigfoot moves through the frame. The basin floor is covered in skeletal remains. I pause the footage and lean close to my laptop screen and spend a long time making sure I am seeing what I think I am seeing. I am. Arranged remains, not scattered, not piled randomly the way bones accumulate at a natural kill site where coyotes and ravens and time do the organizing. Arranged, intentionally, unmistakably, with a logic I can see, even if I cannot immediately decode it. Antlers have been stacked together along the north-facing bank, tines interlocked, the largest on the bottom, smaller ones layered ascending. Rib cages, at least 4 of them, from animals of different sizes, have been stood upright against the trunk of a fallen cedar and positioned side by side like books on a shelf. Long bones, femurs, and tibias, and cannon bones from deer and elk have been laid out in parallel rows on a flat section of gravel near the creek, longest to shortest, left to right, and near the water's edge, clustered together with a density that makes the back of my neck tighten, a pile of skulls. Deer skulls, hog skulls, what looks like a bear cub, the elk calf from 3 nights ago, its head already separated and placed with the others. The most frightening monsters are the ones with rituals. Bigfoot kneels at the skull pile and begins working, moving individual skulls with both hands, repositioning them, tilting them, adjusting their orientation with the focused attention of someone rearranging something that has specific rules I am not privy to. Then Bigfoot lifts one elk skull and places it directly on top of a second, larger elk skull and steps back, stands there, looks at the result for nearly 30 seconds without moving, the steam of its breath rising steady in the cold, wet air. Then Bigfoot adjusts the top skull 2 inches to the left, steps back again, and appears satisfied. I watch that sequence 17 times. I count, because what it means is the thing I cannot stop turning over, the thing that sits under every other thought I have had since that afternoon on the tailgate. This is not a feeding site. This is not territory marking in any framework I was trained to recognize. This is maintenance. This is curation. Something is being built here, and Bigfoot is tending it. You think the bone field is just an animal's feeding site? You are completely, devastatingly wrong. And what Camera 6 captures in the daylight after the rains will be the single most disturbing thing ever recorded by a trail camera in North American wilderness history. Camera 2 sits lower than the others, mounted on a basalt outcrop about 14 feet off the ravine floor, angled down into the basin at roughly 35 degrees. I positioned it there in September to capture ground-level movement along the creek corridor, and for 11 weeks it has given me nothing but deer and one bobcat. At 5:51 a.m. on day 13, 17 minutes before official sunrise, Camera 2 earns every hour I spent hiking it into position. The mountain lion enters the frame from the eastern drainage, moving low and deliberate along the creek bank with its belly close to the wet gravel. It is a large tom, easily 180 pounds, with the thick neck and heavy paws of a dominant male in his prime. His movement is confident in the specific way of an animal that has been using this ridgeline long enough to consider it his. He scent marks the cedar stump at the basin entrance without hesitating, then lifts his head and reads the air, nostrils working, ears rotating forward. The smell of blood and old bone is everywhere down here. To a mountain lion, this ravine must smell like the center of the world. Bigfoot comes out of the tree line 40 seconds later, carrying a bundle of long bones against its chest, and stops the instant it clears the cedars. The two animals see each other at the same moment across roughly 30 feet of open gravel. Neither moves. The mountain lion drops into a crouch so fast it looks like a controlled fall, tail rigid, ears flat, every muscle in its hindquarters loading like a spring. Bigfoot stands fully upright, bones still held against its chest, and watches. For 8 seconds, nothing happens. The creek runs. Steam rises from both animals in the cold morning air. The mountain lion growls first, a low, resonant warning that Camera 2's audio picks up clearly, and begins a slow lateral circle, refusing to concede the carcass pile behind it. It is the dominant male's calculation, too much territory at stake to retreat from something it has not yet confirmed it cannot handle. Bigfoot takes one step forward. The mountain lion launches. The cat covers 30 feet in less than a second and hits Bigfoot in the upper chest and shoulder with both front paws extended, claws fully deployed, the impact violent enough to drive both of them backward into the brush at the ravine's edge. Camera 2 shakes on its mount from the concussive force transmitted through the ground. Branches explode. Dirt and wet leaves spray across the lower frame. The mountain lion gets purchase on Bigfoot's shoulder and neck, rear legs raking in the fast churning motion cats use to open abdominal cavities on deer. Bigfoot roars, and the sound is unlike anything in Camera 2's audio record, a deep percussive blast that sends the creek birds out of the willows 200 yards downstream. Bigfoot gets both hands on the lion's torso, pulls it partially free, and drives it sideways into the cedar trunk with enough force to split the bark in a vertical crack. I photograph later at nearly 4 feet long. The mountain lion drops, springs again, goes for the face. Bigfoot catches it midair by the throat and foreleg, twists. The front leg snaps with a sound the microphone captures cleanly, a single dense crack like a green branch under a boot. That clip ended all debate for me. This was not a relic hiding from humans. This was an apex predator. Bigfoot drives the lion into the gravel and does not stop until nothing moves, then places the body carefully beside the skull pile. Like everything else that enters this ravine, belongs to it now. And now that Bigfoot knows something has been challenging its territory, the patrols begin, the warnings escalate, and what gets left on the trails will make you sick to your stomach. The morning after the mountain lion fight, Camera 1 picks up Bigfoot moving the perimeter at 4:18 a.m., not carrying anything, not transporting a carcass toward the ravine, just walking the boundary line of the basin with a slow, deliberate circuit. By day 15, the patrols are happening twice nightly. By day 17, Camera 4 captures one in full afternoon daylight, 3:22 p.m., the kind of hour when Bigfoot has never once appeared on any of my units across the entire array. The mountain lion fight has changed something in the behavioral calculus, tightened it, charged it. Whatever tolerance Bigfoot previously extended to the surrounding wildlife has been revoked, and the woods around the ravine begin reflecting that revocation in ways I can document and photograph and still barely believe. The tree damage appears first on the northern approach, the same corridor the mountain lion used. 7 ponderosa pines in a 40-yard stretch show fresh damage at heights between 6 and 8 feet off the ground. Not claw marks, which leave parallel grooves with tapered ends, but something broader, more forceful, the bark driven inward in splintered concave impacts that I initially mistake for bear sign until I put a tape measure against the width and realize no bear's forepaw spans 11 inches across. These are strikes. Open-handed, full-force strikes against tree trunks, and the wood underneath the bark is cracked in several of them, not just bruised. What I was looking at on those trees wasn't territorial marking. It was a warning written in a language that anything with a survival instinct could read. The dead coyotes begin appearing on day 18, 3 of them over 4 days, placed at intervals along the 2 main access trails that lead toward the ravine from the southeast. Each one has a broken back, cleanly broken, mid-spine, with no signs of feeding, no tracks from a second predator, no evidence of a chase or a struggle in the surrounding ground. They are simply there, positioned across the trail like barriers, like punctuation. I photograph each one and send the images to a wildlife pathologist contact in Oregon who tells me the spinal trauma is consistent with something applying sudden, massive compressive force directly downward across the animal's back. He asks me what I think did it. I tell him I'm still working on that. The black bear appears on day 20, a sow with 2 cubs moving down the eastern drainage toward the basin in the early morning. Camera 8 captures her approach, her paws at the tree line 80 yards out, and then the sudden full reversal, cubs scrambling to follow before she has cleared the cedars or come within any angle that should have given her a visual or scent read on the ravine. She does not look back. She moves her cubs out of the drainage at a pace just below a run and does not reappear on any camera for the remaining duration of the study. Bigfoot chases her out of frame 11 seconds after she turns, not pursuing to close distance, ensuring departure. This ravine now has one rule: only one animal decides who enters. You think you've seen the worst of what this footage contains? You haven't even come close, because something far more fragile than a mountain lion or a black bear is about to walk into that ravine, and Bigfoot has already been watching him for a very, very long time. Camera 9 is the one I almost never check first. When I pull the card on day 23 and load it into the laptop, I am expecting more of the same. Instead, I get a flashlight beam cutting through the dark at 6:47 p.m., and behind it, a man. He enters the drainage from the south, moving fast and careless, boots hitting the wet ground with the flat-footed confidence of someone who has been in these hills before and does not think they hold anything he needs to be afraid of. He is carrying a rifle slung across his back and a heavy pack that tells me he is planning to be out here for a while. In his left hand, the flashlight sweeps in short arcs, and I can see from the way the beam keeps dropping toward the ground that he is following a blood trail. The mountain lion's blood trail, I realize, tracing backward from the ravine floor along the same corridor the cat used to enter. Someone has been on the ridge line, someone found blood sign and followed it inward. The way poachers follow wounded animals they have no legal right to be pursuing on this land, into a basin they have no permit to enter. I watch him cross Camera 9's field of view and feel the first cold certainty settle into my stomach. He does not know what left that blood. He does not know that the trail lead to Bigfoot, and he does not know that somewhere beyond the tree line at the ravine's edge, something is already aware that he is here. Camera 6 picks him up 14 minutes later at the basin entrance, flashlight sweeping across the bone field for the first time. He stops. The beam moves slowly left to right across the arranged remains, the stacked antlers, the upright rib cages, the long bones laid out in their parallel rows, and even from the camera angle, I can see the change in his posture, the way his shoulders come up, the way his feet stop moving and stay stopped. He stands at the edge of the bone field for 2 full minutes without advancing, the flashlight working back and forth across the skulls near the creek bank. Then he does the thing that makes my chest tighten when I watch it. He walks in. He kicks apart the nearest skull arrangement first, the one closest to the cedar line, his boot scattering 3 deer skulls across the gravel with a casual violence that reads as either bravado or profound ignorance of where he is and what this place means to whatever built it. He crouches and picks up a smaller skull, turns it over in the flashlight beam, and slides it into his pack. Then a second one. He is collecting, treating the bone field like a curiosity, like something he stumbled onto that belongs to no one and therefore belongs to him. Camera 6's audio is not strong enough to capture footsteps at distance, but at the 23-minute mark of the man's time in the basin, something moves at the upper edge of the frame. A darkness that is slightly denser than the surrounding dark, shifting position at the tree line without sound, without the branch snap or leaf crush that any animal of that mass should be producing on wet ground. Bigfoot is at the perimeter. Has been there, I realize when I scrub backward through the footage, since approximately 3 minutes after the man entered the bone field. Bigfoot has been watching him dismantle the shrine for 20 minutes without making a sound, and the patience of that, the absolute stillness of it, is the most frightening thing Camera 6 has ever recorded. When I understood what I was watching, I stopped the footage and sat in the dark for a long time before I could make myself press play again. The man spends another 40 minutes in the basin. He handles bones, repositions himself, photographs things with his phone, moves around the perimeter of the arranged remains with the casual tourism of someone who has no idea he is being observed from a distance of less than 60 feet by something that has already decided what he is. Bigfoot circles the entire time, staying just outside the flashlight's reach, moving only when the beam moves away, patient and systematic and absolutely silent. The circle tightens incrementally over the 40 minutes in a way I can track by watching the density of shadow at the tree line shift position on the camera. By the time the man decides to leave, Bigfoot is no longer at the perimeter. Bigfoot is between him and the drainage exit. The man's flashlight finds the gap in the cedars and he moves toward it, pack heavy with stolen skulls, rifle still slung and useless on his back, and at the moment he reaches the gap, Bigfoot steps out of the dark and fills it completely. The footage captures the man's flashlight beam hitting Bigfoot's center mass and then dropping as the man drops, stumbling backward onto the gravel, and the sound that comes out of him, picked up clearly on Camera 6's audio at that proximity, is not a word. It is not a shout. It is the sound a person makes when every survival instinct fires at once, and the body cannot decide what to do with all of it simultaneously. Bigfoot does not close the distance. Not yet. Bigfoot stands in the gap and watches the man scramble backward into the center of the bone field, and the deliberateness of that, allowing the retreat only in one direction, only deeper in, is when I understood that what I was watching was not an animal reacting. It was an animal that had already decided how this would end and was simply executing the steps in order. The man realizes where he has been herded when his back foot hits the skull pile. He stops, looks behind him, looks back at Bigfoot standing motionless at the only exit. His flashlight hand is shaking badly enough that the beam bounces across the arranged bones in a way that would almost look like a light show if the context were anything other than what it is. He starts talking. I cannot make out words at this audio quality, but the cadence is unmistakable, fast, high, the rhythm of a person bargaining with something that does not recognize the transaction. Bigfoot walks toward him slowly, reaches down near the cedar line without breaking stride, and picks up the broken elk antler that has been lying at the bone field's edge since the mountain lion fight, carries it loose in one hand, continues forward until the man has nowhere left to go and the skull pile is directly at his back. And then Bigfoot simply stops and looks at him for a long moment in the thin beam of the flashlight. What follows next is recorded in full by Camera 6, and I will tell you plainly that I have not watched it more than once. I have not been able to. Bigfoot skins the man alive as he screams in agony. It was slow and methodical and carried out with the same focused deliberateness I watched Bigfoot apply to repositioning skulls and walking perimeter lines and stacking antlers in order of size. The Bone Fields Creek keeps running through all of it. The audio does not spare anything. When it is finished, Bigfoot places what remains at the center of the shrine, beside the elk skull pile, arranged with the same care applied to everything else in this ravine. Then Bigfoot walks to the drainage exit, pauses at the gap in the cedars, and looks back at the camera for 11 seconds. The same duration as the Camera 5 look, the same stillness, the same full and complete attention directed straight down the lens. Then Bigfoot walks out of frame and Camera 6 records nothing but the creek and the bone field and the dark for the remaining 4 hours until dawn. I have filed the footage with the appropriate authorities. I have answered their questions. I have not returned to the basin. I do not intend to. What I know now, after 23 days of footage across 9 cameras and more hours of review than I can accurately count, is this. Bigfoot was not hiding in those woods. Bigfoot was not a shy, elusive primate avoiding human contact out of fear. Bigfoot was managing a territory with rules I did not understand until it was too late for someone else. You need to know the bones of this because 3 ski patrollers went up a closed ridgeline for a routine avalanche assessment 72 hours after a historic storm. 90-minute loop, standard protocol. What came back was body cam footage that should not exist. The footage doesn't begin with headlamps clicking on or a truck door slamming. That would be too clean, too prepared. Instead, the body cam lurches into motion already mid-stride, and I have to tell you, watching this for the first time, I actually leaned back from my monitor. because Patrol 1 is already running, not a jog, nor a cautious walk through fresh powder. He is pushing through waist-deep snow like something is breathing down his neck before the timestamp even hits 0. Then comes the moment that stopped my heart. At exactly 12 seconds in, a figure shifts behind a cluster of wind-carved ice pillars about 65 feet upslope and 40 feet to the left. I had to scrub this frame by frame. It's not obvious. It's barely there. A large upright shape, partially obscured by the sideways snow, steps between two rock outcroppings. Not a skier. There's no lift within miles. Not a rescue worker. No reflective striping. And definitely not wildlife at normal scale. Because whatever this is stands so tall that the ice pillars only reach its midsection. The camera operator doesn't even notice the shape. He just keeps trudging forward, oblivious to what's sharing his mountain. At 18 seconds, Patrol 1 keys his radio and says something that should have been the warning. Tracks are fresh, they're not melting in. This storm's burying everything except these. The camera tilts down, and there they are. Massive footprints sunk deep into the snowpack, each one spaced nearly 5 feet apart, far beyond any human stride. Some are partially filled with drifting powder, which means the creature has been pacing, moving back and forth, waiting. Behind him, still visible in frame for less than a heartbeat, it moves again, but this time it isn't standing high on the ridge anymore. It's lower now, closer, much closer to the camera team than anyone watching initially realized. The distance it covered between frames doesn't even seem physically possible, and nobody filming appears to notice it happening in real time. And just when you think that's the most horrifying thing hidden in this footage, wait until you see what the second camera captured completely by accident. Because while the crew thought they were documenting tracks somewhere out in front of them, something else was already watching them back from the tree line only yards away. Patrol 2's helmet cam is where the dread starts compounding. Because Patrol 1 is still blind to the creature tracking them, but a second set of eyes is now scanning the same hellscape from a different angle. And that second set of eyes sees everything. It just doesn't understand what it's seeing yet. The wind here is even more violent. Audio clipping spikes every few seconds, turning radio chatter into shredded fragments. I'd describe the storm as visually aggressive. Snow doesn't fall so much as it attacks horizontally, moving like a wall of needles instead of precipitation. Patrol 2 is facing uphill, his breath fogging the lower edge of the lens. He keeps tilting his head, squinting, trying to make sense of the ridgeline maybe 120 feet above their position. At 1 minute and 10 seconds, I've time-stamped this obsessively, the camera briefly stabilizes. Maybe he braces against a rock. Maybe he just stopped breathing. Either way, the image goes still for just over a full second. And that's when you see it. The creature is standing on that ridge, motionless and completely vertical. It is partially snow-covered, crusted white on its shoulders and head, blending so perfectly into the storm that only its outline separates it from the environment. But that outline is wrong. It's too tall by at least 3 feet, too wide through the chest, and it's not hunkered down against the wind like a human would be. It's facing directly downhill, directly at them. Patrol 2 keys. His radio and his voice has that particular crack, not from cold, but from confusion bleeding into fear. Do you guys see that ridge? There's something up there. No response. The storm is eating their transmissions. Patrol 1 has drifted out of frame somewhere downslope. Patrol 3 is even farther back, barely visible as a dark smudge against the whiteout. At 1 minute and 17 seconds, the creature on the ridge takes a single step forward. But here's what haunts me. It doesn't step downhill. It steps sideways. It's actually tracking them, parallel to their route, like it's matching their heading without ever committing to an intercept. That's not animal behavior. The team still doesn't recognize the danger of this creature. Patrol 2 lowers his camera, turns to check his equipment, and the ridge goes momentarily unwatched. When he looks back up, only 3 seconds later, the creature is gone. Not faded into the storm, not obscured by a gust, just vanished as if it never existed. But I've seen the full footage. I know where it went. And in the next few moments, the storm gives the monster cover to do something that no eyewitness has ever captured on body cam before, something that made me double-check that I wasn't watching special effects. The storm thickens without warning. Visibility drops to near zero for several seconds at a time. The body cam feeds flicker between white voids and brief, agonizing glimpses of the slope. Here's what I caught on my 17th pass through this section. During one of those whiteout pulses, maybe 4 seconds of absolute blindness, something changes. When the snow thins just enough to see again, the creature is now between camera angles, positioned squarely inside their route, approximately 120 feet behind Patrol 3. Patrol 3 has no idea. His camera shows him trudging forward, head down, occasionally checking a handheld GPS unit. The wind snatches away most of his radio chatter, but I manage to isolate one fragment. We should turn back. This is getting worse than forecast. He doesn't mention the creature. He doesn't even look over his shoulder. The Sasquatch tracking them remains completely invisible to his awareness, even as the distance shrinks. At 2 minutes and 40 seconds, Patrol 3 stops. Not because he heard something, not because he sensed danger. He stops because he looks down at the snow directly in front of him, and his camera tilts downward out of habit. The footprints beneath his boots are now fresher than the ones he was following before. That doesn't make sense. He hasn't passed anyone. No one has doubled back. But the tracks are there, deep, wide, overlapping his own trail like something has been walking in his exact footsteps from behind. That's when the storm gusts hard enough to shake the camera sideways. I mean, violent full-body sway. The audio spikes with tearing wind, and for a split second, the lens points uphill rather than down. When it stabilizes, when Patrol 3 regains his footing and straightens up, the creature has closed another gap. You could see that it's now roughly 80 feet behind him. That's not a distant observer anymore. That's a predator that has decided proximity is no longer a risk worth avoiding. It stands motionless, half-crouched against the wind, but still dwarfing every rock outcropping around it. The outline is undeniable. Broad shoulders and long arms. A head that sits too high on its neck, angled slightly forward as if sniffing the air. Patrol 3 finally turns. His camera sweeps across the slope and misses the creature by maybe 15 degrees. He's looking too far left, too low. His brain isn't calibrated to recognize something that tall standing, that close in a blizzard. He turns back downhill and keeps moving. It's crazy to think that they still have no idea. But the damage is done. The proximity shift has already happened. The creature is no longer observing from a distance. It has entered their perimeter, and the patrol has less than 90 seconds before everything falls apart. Now what happens next will make you question every blurry photo you've ever dismissed. This is the section where everything shifts from uneasy speculation to full-blown horror. Because up until now, the patrol has been operating on instinct, moving downhill, checking tracks, occasionally glancing uphill without truly seeing. But at 3 minutes and 55 seconds, that changes. And the way it changes has haunted me for weeks. Patrol 1 suddenly appears in Patrol 2's frame, converging with Patrol 3 near a cluster of exposed rock. They're regrouping finally, drawing close enough to shout over the wind instead of relying on the shredded radio frequencies. Patrol 2 is facing uphill, his body cam aimed roughly toward the ridge they descended 20 minutes ago. His breathing is heavy, visible as fog, even through the distortion. Then he shouts. I had to amplify the audio and filter out the wind noise to catch this clearly. Something is moving with us. All 3 men turn uphill simultaneously, and the camera captures the creature clearly now for the first time. It is standing in partial profile, no more than 55 feet away, slightly crouched against the wind shear, but still towering above the surrounding terrain. The trees at this elevation are stunted, twisted, barely reaching 8 feet tall. Its shoulders clear them by a visible margin. I'm looking at a creature that stands somewhere between 8 and 9 feet, covered in dark, wet fur that clings to its frame like matted insulation. Snow has accumulated on its upper back and the crown of its head, but its face, what I can see of it, is bare, skin appearing almost gray against the whiteout. It's undeniably Bigfoot, and I think the patrols knew it too. Its posture isn't random, it isn't casual. It stands with its weight slightly forward, arms hanging but hands partially open, head angled downslope at an unnatural degree. It is tracking them, watching their every micro movement. Patrol 3 freezes, and I mean full body lockup. His camera shakes only from the wind now, not from movement. Patrol 1 raises his arm, pointing directly at Bigfoot, and for one frozen second, I think he's going to say something coherent, maybe identify it, maybe name the threat. But Bigfoot has moved. Not a step, but a repositioning. Now it stands approximately 32 feet away, having closed the gap without any sound of footsteps reaching the microphones. That's what terrifies me most about this footage. You hear the wind. You hear the men breathing, shouting, scrambling. You never hear Bigfoot. Patrol 1's arm drops. His voice comes through the distortion. Back now. They don't run yet. They walk backward, eyes locked on the shape that has somehow breached their safety bubble without making a single sound. But running is coming. And once it starts, it doesn't stop. And if you think seeing Bigfoot from 30 feet is bad, what if I tell you the hunt begins? I need you to understand what breaking distance means in this context. It's not a vehicle stopping suddenly. It's the precise moment when a threat shifts from observation to action, when whatever was pacing you decides that watching is over and taking begins. And that moment happens at 4 minutes and 42 seconds, when Patrol 1 finally stops walking backward and turns to run. The storyteller in me wants to call this section the transition from anomaly to pursuit, because that's exactly what the footage shows. Up until now, Bigfoot was moving laterally, adjusting position, closing gaps during whiteouts. But it wasn't advancing directly. Now, as all 3 patrol members pivot downhill and break into a desperate, uncoordinated retreat, the body language on that massive frame changes. Patrol 2 stumbles first. His camera whips downward, catching a split-second view of his own boots skidding across ice, then jerks back up as he catches himself. When the lens levels again, Bigfoot is no longer standing in that slight crouch. It is moving, advancing directly down the slope, each step deliberate and eerily silent, minimizing snow displacement like something that has spent centuries mastering this terrain. At 5 minutes and 12 seconds, the footage shows something that made me rewind at least 20 times. Bigfoot closes distance without appearing to rush. I measured the frames from the ridge edge to the first rock outcropping, a span of roughly 22 feet covered in under 2 seconds. But it's not a sprint. It's a long, powerful stride that eats terrain in chunks. Snow bursts outward from each footfall, but the microphone barely registers it beneath the wind. Distance collapses from 32 feet to 20, then to 15 within seconds. Patrol 1 screams into his radio. I've isolated the audio, scrubbed out the static, and his exact words are shredded, but the terror is unmistakable. "We've got a large animal, unknown, moving fast." The transmission cuts out mid-sentence, not from interference, but from the microphone maxing out as he sucks in a breath to scream again. Patrol 3 glances back. His camera catches Bigfoot at roughly 12 feet now. That's close enough to see individual snowflakes melting against the dark fur of its chest, close enough to see the way its head tilts slightly as it moves, almost curious, like a hunter watching prey trip over its own feet. Then Patrol 3 makes the mistake that ends everything. He tries to turn fully, to change direction, to cut sideways across a rock face. And Bigfoot reacts instantly, not with a roar or a charge, but with a subtle increase in pace, a lengthening of stride that eats the remaining distance like it was never there. The hunt isn't beginning anymore. It's already over. These men just don't know it yet. The timestamp hits 6 minutes and 3 seconds, and I have to be honest with you. I've watched this section over 100 times, and I still flinch. Not because it's gory. There's no blood in this footage, no screams that go on for minutes. What makes this unbearable is the speed. Everything before this has been build-up, tracking, pacing, closing distance. But the actual snatching event happens so fast that your brain refuses to process it the first time through. Patrol 3 turns to run downhill. That's the trigger. He's maybe 8 feet ahead of Patrol 2, 10 feet behind Patrol 1, and he's just decided to stop walking backward and commit to the sprint. His body cam swings forward, showing the slope below. Rocks, snow, the distant shape of Patrol 1's jacket disappearing into whiteout. Then Bigfoot enters the frame at full speed for the first time. I need you to understand what full speed looks like for something this size. It's not a human sprint. It's not even a bear charge. It's a low, explosive acceleration that launches approximately 800 pounds of muscle downhill with terrifying efficiency. Snow doesn't just crunch underfoot, it erupts, blasting sideways in plumes that momentarily obscure the legs. The stride length is absurd, easily 10 feet between footprints, covering ground in a way that shouldn't be possible on this steep, ice-laced terrain. Patrol 3 never finishes his turn. Bigfoot reaches him in under 2 seconds. I've timed it from the moment the acceleration begins to the moment impact registers on the microphone, exactly 1.8 seconds. The camera captures only partial movement, an arm extending impossibly long, swinging down from shoulder height, then sudden, violent displacement of Patrol 3's entire body, lifted sideways like he weighs nothing. Just like that, Patrol 3 is gone. His body cam, still recording, still transmitting, shows a chaotic blur of snow, sky, and what might be fabric. Then it slams into something solid, and the feed goes dark for half a second before recovering. No struggle is clearly visible. That's what haunts me most. You don't see Patrol 3 fighting back. You don't see Bigfoot's face or hands. You just see motion, rapid, violent displacement, sideways and upward, disappearing into the whiteout like a doll snatched off a shelf. Patrol 2's camera catches the aftermath. His scream cuts through the wind, high-pitched and raw. Oh my, it got him! It got him! The radio feedback explodes, frequencies colliding as Patrol 1 shouts something unintelligible from farther downslope. There's nothing left where Patrol 3 stood except a deep trench in the snow, a furrow carved by something heavy being dragged uphill at speed. 2 men remain on the mountain. Bigfoot has made its first strike, and it took less than 3 seconds from first contact to complete disappearance. If you think losing 1 man in the snow is the worst of this footage, you're not ready for the next section of the footage. From here on, it becomes almost unbearable to watch. Not because the quality degrades, though the storm certainly doesn't help, but because you can hear the exact moment when survival instinct overrides everything else. Patrol 1 and Patrol 2 are now separated from Patrol 3's last known position by roughly 40 feet of vertical slope, and they both know on some primal level that turning back is not an option. They run downhill blindly. I mean that literally. Visibility has collapsed to maybe 15 feet, sometimes less. Patrol 1 leads the descent with the body cam swinging violently across his chest as he half runs and half slides down the slope. Snow blasts across the lens while his boots constantly lose traction beneath him. Patrol 2 follows unevenly behind, repeatedly looking back into the whiteout because both men are more afraid of what's behind them than the mountain beneath their feet. At 7 minutes and 20 seconds, Bigfoot reappears on their left flank, running parallel to them through the storm. It keeps pace effortlessly while the patrolmen stumble downhill in panic. The creature moves upright with long, controlled strides that barely seem affected by the terrain or wind. The body cams finally capture clearer details now. Thick, wet fur hangs dark against its body. Steam pours from its mouth with each breath, and its proportions look increasingly wrong the longer the footage lingers on them. The arms hang too low, the chest is too broad, and each stride covers an impossible distance downhill. Then Patrol 2 notices what it's carrying. Bigfoot is dragging what remains of Patrol 3 by one leg while running. The corpse repeatedly slams against rocks and frozen ground hard enough to jerk the body unnaturally. Patrol 3's helmet is gone, most of the lower half of his face has been torn away, and one arm is missing completely above the elbow. Blood continues dripping steadily from the exposed shoulder, while strands of intestine drag intermittently through the snow behind the body. Patrol 2 nearly falls when he realizes what he's looking at. Bigfoot turns its head toward them while still running, and slightly lifts Patrol 3's corpse higher, almost presenting it to them as they flee downhill. Patrol 1 slips into a buried rock hard enough for the camera to crack against stone before scrambling upright again. Both men are losing control psychologically now. Their breathing becomes ragged and panicked, while every attempt at communication collapses halfway through. Bigfoot continues pacing them from the left side of the slope while subtly forcing them downhill into open terrain. Every time the patrolmen angle toward rock cover, the creature drifts closer and cuts them off, steering them back toward the exposed snowfield. The behavior no longer feels random. It feels deliberate, as though the creature fully understands how to herd them exactly where it wants them. Patrol 3's body continues slamming against the mountainside while the creature runs beside them. At one point, the corpse strikes a protruding rock hard enough for the remaining arm to bend backward unnaturally, partially separating the shoulder from the torso in a burst of blood across the snow. A few seconds later, one of Patrol 3's boots tears free entirely and disappears into the storm, while the exposed ankle twists loosely beneath shredded thermal layers. At 7 minutes and 40 seconds, Bigfoot closes the distance again until it is running maybe 20 feet away from Patrol 2. The camera stabilizes just long enough to capture the clearest view of the creature anywhere in the footage. Blood coats most of its torso up to the elbows, fresh streaks running visibly through the fur from Patrol 3's remains. Its breathing stays completely controlled despite the incline and speed. Then the creature abruptly lifts Patrol 3's body higher with one arm while still running. The corpse folds violently backward over its forearm until something tears audibly through the wind. The abdomen partially splits open and dark organs spill downward against the creature's chest. Without slowing pace, Bigfoot lowers its head and bites directly into the exposed side of Patrol 3's neck hard enough to jerk the body sideways while blood immediately pours across its chest and forearm. Patrol 2 begins openly sobbing while running. He repeatedly calls Patrol 3's name into the radio, despite the fact that the remains are fully visible less than 30 feet away. His words barely register through the wind because he has started hyperventilating so badly that most sentences collapse into ragged gasping. The creature disappears back into the whiteout almost immediately afterward. One moment it is visible pacing them through the storm, and the next it simply vanishes beyond the snow without any clear indication of direction. The disappearance itself seems to affect the surviving patrolman more severely than direct visual contact. Once they lose sight of it, both men begin looking in every direction simultaneously while continuing downhill, terrified that it has repositioned somewhere ahead of them. Only 90 seconds have passed since Patrol 3 was taken. At 8 minutes and 30 seconds, the two surviving patrolmen reach a rocky outcrop protruding from the slope. The formation provides partial shelter from the wind and enough cover for them to collapse behind the largest boulder while desperately trying to regain control of their breathing. Patrol 1 nearly vomits into his face, covering while fumbling repeatedly with the GPS unit attached to his jacket. Patrol 2 keeps sweeping his camera toward the whiteout behind them, expecting movement with every gust of snow. The atmosphere during these moments becomes almost worse than the chase itself because both men understand instinctively that the creature has not abandoned pursuit. Patrol 1 eventually says the thought out loud while scanning the storm beyond the rocks. Where is it? The question hangs there beneath the sound of the wind because neither man believes they escaped anything. They are simply waiting for it to reveal itself again. Patrol 2 notices the blood first. Fresh streaks of dark red are smeared across the snow behind the rocks where they stopped. The camera follows the trail upward toward the ledge above them, and the footage captures Patrol 3's severed arm resting carefully on the boulder directly overhead. The glove remains attached to the hand. Snow accumulates slowly across the exposed flesh while the fingers move slightly in the wind. Patrol 2 recoils backward hard enough to strike the rock behind him with an audible grunt. At the same moment, both cameras tilt upward toward the ridge above the outcrop. Bigfoot stands there, motionless against the storm. The creature stands motionless on a secondary ledge roughly 25 feet above them, partially silhouetted through the snowfall. Strips of flesh from Patrol 3's body hang across its shoulders, while the corpse itself has been opened further, ribs exposed beneath shredded clothing and organs hanging down its torso in dark strands. Patrol 1 immediately drags Patrol 2 sideways from behind the rocks as Bigfoot begins descending toward them. It moves downhill with terrifying control, stepping from ledge to ledge without hesitation while heavy impacts echo through the storm. The patrolmen break into another downhill sprint the moment the creature reaches the outcrop. Patrol 1 nearly loses balance while pulling Patrol 2 through knee-deep snow as the sound of heavy footfalls behind them signals that the creature has finally accelerated into full pursuit. Then Bigfoot throws what remains of Patrol 3 downhill toward them. The corpse crashes directly into Patrol 2 from behind, hard enough to knock him completely off his feet. Both bodies tumble together through the snow, while exposed organs spill across his jacket and arms. Patrol 2 begins screaming uncontrollably as he tries to shove the remains away from himself, but he becomes tangled in the corpse during the fall and cannot regain his footing quickly enough. Patrol 1 continues downhill several strides before realizing his partner is no longer beside him. When he turns back, the footage captures Bigfoot reaching Patrol 2 before he can stand. The creature lands on top of him with enough force to drive both bodies deep into the snowpack. One hand clamps completely over Patrol 2's face, while the other grabs his left leg near the knee. Then it pulls in opposite directions. The body separates at the hip almost instantly. The sound resembles wet fabric, tearing mixed with cracking wood. Blood floods outward across the snow, while Patrol 2 screams with such intensity that the microphone distorts. The lower half of his body remains trapped beneath Patrol 3's remains, while Bigfoot lifts the upper torso by the skull. One thumb visibly sinks into an eye socket as the creature raises him higher. Then it slams his head against a boulder. The first impact cracks the helmet. The second caves part of it inward. By the third strike, blood and fragments of bone spray visibly across the surrounding snow. Patrol 1 turns and runs harder than before, no longer attempting controlled movement. The footage becomes almost impossible to follow because he is effectively throwing himself downhill in blind desperation, bouncing off rocks and repeatedly losing footing while the storm swallows everything behind him. For several seconds, the only sounds are his ragged breathing and the heavy impacts of footsteps somewhere beyond visibility. Then, even the footsteps disappear. That silence causes him to slow instinctively. Bigfoot emerges directly ahead of him through the whiteout. The creature had circled downhill again without being seen. Patrol 1 screams and attempts to change direction, but Bigfoot reaches him before he can turn fully. The impact sends the camera spinning sideways into the snow while the audio erupts into static and shouting. The footage stabilizes briefly with the lens partially buried sideways against the ground, giving a clear view of Patrol 1 attempting to crawl away through the snow while gasping for breath. Bigfoot grabs the back of his backpack and drags him backward effortlessly across the ice. Patrol 1 claws desperately at the ground while screaming for help that no longer exists. Then the creature plants one enormous foot directly onto the middle of his back. The spine breaks audibly beneath the pressure. Patrol 1's body folds unnaturally against the slope while his scream abruptly collapses into choking sounds. Bigfoot kneels over him while steam pours from its mouth into the freezing air. The camera remains tilted sideways only a few feet away as the creature hooks both hands beneath Patrol 1's jaw and begins pulling upward steadily. The skin stretches first, then muscle tears. Finally, the lower jaw separates completely from the skull in a burst of blood that splashes directly across the camera lens. Patrol 1 continues convulsing weakly against the snow for several seconds afterward while thick gurgling sounds spill from the ruined cavity where his mouth used to be. Bigfoot holds the detached jawbone briefly in one hand before dropping it beside the body. Then the creature notices the camera. It slowly leans forward until its face fills almost the entire frame. The details are horrifyingly clear now, thick ridges above deep-set eyes, wet blood hanging from strands of fur around the mouth, steam rolling steadily from flared nostrils. The expression itself is not enraged or animalistic in any recognizable way. The creature simply looks focused, fully aware that it is being observed. After several seconds, one massive hand reaches toward the lens. The image tears sideways into static. The audio continues briefly afterward. Heavy dragging sounds move across the snow alongside repeated wet impacts and intermittent cracking noises that resemble bones snapping one after another. Then the recording cuts to silence completely. That's where the footage ends. That's where every question begins. You've seen what I've seen. Now ask yourself, if this evidence isn't real, why did the people who reviewed it refuse to go back into the field ever again? My name is Jesse Stroud. I moved onto this property in September 2015 because I wanted land of my own, quiet mornings, and nobody telling me what to do with my weekends. I got all of that. What I did not get was any kind of warning about what was already living here before I showed up with my lumber and my big plans. The clearing crew finished on a Thursday. By Sunday morning, something had gone through the eastern edge of my property and snapped 3 trees at about 8 feet off the ground. Not knocked over, not uprooted, snapped, like someone had grabbed them and just broken them the way you'd break a pencil. I walked out there with my coffee and stood looking at it for a good 5 minutes, trying to work out what could have done that. My first thought was wind. My second thought was that I have lived through plenty of wind, and wind has never once snapped a tree at a consistent 8 feet like it was trying to make a point. My third thought was that maybe I should have bought that condo instead. I told myself it was probably the clearing equipment. Maybe one of the crew had clipped them on the way out, and I just hadn't noticed. I went back inside and finished my coffee and felt pretty good about that explanation for about 2 days. Then I found the footprint. It was in the mud at the creek edge on the eastern boundary, 14 inches long, 5 toes, pressed so deep into the ground that whatever made it had to be carrying serious weight on that foot. I put my own boot next to it, and my boot looked like a child's shoe. I stood there staring at it, and then I looked up at the tree line, and there was not a single bird calling, not a single branch moving, nothing rustling in the undergrowth, just total dead silence on a morning that had been plenty noisy 5 minutes before I got there. I went home and sat at my kitchen table, and I want you to know that I am a practical man who does not panic. So naturally, I ordered 6 trail cameras, 2 motion sensors, and an audio recorder, and had them shipped overnight. I had the cameras up by Wednesday, 6 of them spread across the eastern boundary, covering every angle I could manage, strapped to trees, motion activated, night vision on all of them. I have set up trail cameras more times than I can count for deer season, and I can usually get through the whole process without thinking too hard about it. This time, I kept stopping, not because the setup was difficult, but because the woods were doing that thing again, where everything goes quiet the moment you pay attention to it. No birds, no squirrels, nothing moving in the undergrowth. Just me out there screwing mounts into bark and trying not to feel like I was being watched while I set up equipment specifically to catch whatever was watching me. I finished around noon, walked back to the house, and told myself that whatever showed up on those cards was going to have a perfectly reasonable explanation. A bear maybe, an unusually large one. I was going to pull that footage in a week and feel a little embarrassed about the overnight shipping charge. That is not what happened. I pulled the first card after 6 days. I sat down at my kitchen table the same way I always do, coffee on the left, laptop open, ready to scroll through a week of deer and raccoons and maybe a coyote if I was lucky. The first 3 nights were normal. Deer moving through at dusk, a possum at around 11, the usual. I was actually starting to feel good about myself and my very reasonable bear theory. Then I got to Thursday night at 2 a.m. and I stopped scrolling. It was upright. It was massive, moving through the eastern edge of the cleared zone at a pace that was slow and deliberate in a way that made my stomach do something unpleasant. I rewound it and watched it again. Then I watched it a third time, leaning close enough to the screen that I could see my own reflection in it. I have been hunting my whole adult life, and I know what every animal looks like on a trail camera at 2 in the morning. I know what a bear looks like when it stands up. I know what a tall man in dark clothing looks like. I know what shadows do at the edge of an infrared field, and this was none of those things. I sat back in my chair and looked at my coffee going cold on the left side of the table, and I said it out loud even though there was nobody in that kitchen to hear it. Bigfoot, not as a question and not as a joke either. Just the word sitting there in the air because it was the only one that fit what I was looking at, and I am too old to spend energy pretending otherwise. I called my brother that same night and told him what was on the footage. He asked me to send him the clip. I sent it. He called back 10 minutes later and told me it was a bear and that I needed to get out of the house more. I thanked him for his input and hung up. And then maybe 4 days after I pulled that first card, I was out at dusk checking the cameras and topping up the batteries on the 2 eastern ones. The light was going flat the way it does in late October, that gray hour where everything loses its edges and the tree line just becomes one long dark wall. I was about halfway through swapping the battery on the second camera when I heard the undergrowth shift. It was not the sound of a small animal or a branch settling. It was the sound of something with serious weight behind it, adjusting its position the way a large animal sounds when it has been standing still for a while and decides to move. I stopped what I was doing and looked up. It was standing at the edge of the trees about 50 feet away from me. I know what you are probably picturing, and that is not what this was. It was not lunging at me, and it was not screaming. It was just standing there in the gray light, looking directly at me, the way you look at someone who has walked into a room they were not invited into. That was exactly what it felt like too, standing there, holding a trail camera battery in my hand, like an idiot, like I had walked into a room that belonged to someone else and gotten caught. Neither of us moved for close to a full minute. I counted because I needed something to do with my brain that was not panicking. Then it stepped back into the trees and was gone, and I stood there in the gray light alone and noticed that my legs had started shaking at some point during that minute without asking my permission. I went inside that night and pulled up the footage from all 6 cameras covering the eastern boundary. I was looking for a better angle of what I had just seen, something that gave me more detail than my own 2 eyes had managed in that gray light, and I did find it on camera 3. There it was, same figure, same tree line, pretty much exactly what I remembered. But then I checked camera 5, which covers the area behind and to the left of where I had been standing, and I watched it once, and then I watched it again, because my brain was genuinely refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. While I had been standing there staring at the one at the tree line, a second one had come out of the woods on the left side of the property and closed to within 60 feet of me from behind. 60 feet away, and I never heard it coming. never felt anything behind me, never had a single instinct fire that told me something that large was standing that close to the back of my head. It just stood there the whole time I was having my little staring contest with the first one. And then, when the first one stepped back into the trees, the second one turned around and walked back into the woods like it had somewhere else to be. I sat with that footage for a long time that night, because here is what that means. 2 of them, that close, and nothing happened. Which sounds like good news until you really think about it. Something that size deciding not to act is not the same as something that size being unable to act. That was a choice. And whatever the reason behind that choice was, I was fairly certain it had nothing to do with being afraid of me. After the footage from that night, I stopped thinking about this as a trail camera project and started thinking about it as something I needed to actually understand. So I spent a few days doing something I probably should have done before I ever signed the deed on this property, which was looking into the land itself. I pulled the survey maps and walked the property with them, tracing exactly where the clearing crew had worked against what I was finding on the ground. And when I laid those 2 things on top of each other, the picture that came together was not one I felt great about. The stand of trees I had taken down was not sitting in a random patch of forest. It was sitting directly on a natural corridor that ran along the eastern boundary, following the creek line, moving through a gap between 2 ridges to the north. A route that anything large moving through this part of the country would use, because the terrain funneled you there, whether you were a deer or a bear, or apparently something considerably larger than either. I had not cleared a patch of trees. I had taken out a section of a road, one that had been in use for a long time by something that did not appreciate the renovation. I drove out to the cleared zone that evening and stood at the stumps of the trees I had taken down and looked at what I had done to that corridor, and I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because it surprised me. It was not fear, and it was not defensiveness. It was guilt, plain and simple guilt, the same feeling you get when you break something that belonged to someone else. And I remember standing there thinking, did I even check what was out here before I let those guys start the chainsaws? Did I even ask? The answer was no. I had not asked because it had not occurred to me that there was anyone to ask. I went down to the creek bed the following morning with a flashlight and a measuring tape. I was thinking maybe some older prints, a few seasons worth of activity, enough to confirm that the corridor had been in regular use. I went down there looking for a few old prints, and what I found instead made me stand in that creek for 10 minutes, just staring at the ground like I had never seen mud before. The prints were layered, pressed into the dried mud and stone at different depths, different ages, some of them recent enough that the edges were still sharp, and some of them so old they had basically become part of the rock itself. The same stride, the same size, the same route, over and over again, going back further than I could put a number on. I am not a geologist, and I cannot tell you exactly how old the deepest ones were. What I can tell you is that the tree stumps I was feeling guilty about the night before were saplings the last time something had not been walking through this creek bed. So how long had this been going on? How many years was something using this corridor before a single human being had any claim to this land at all? I did not have an answer for that standing in that creek bed, and I still do not have one now. What I had was a measuring tape, a flashlight, and the slowly settling realization that whatever I had disturbed when I started my clearing crew was not a recent arrival that had wandered onto my property. It had been here so much longer than me that the word trespasser did not apply to either one of us. And it definitely did not apply to the one leaving 14-inch prints in the rock. This was November 2015. I was out fixing the eastern fence line on a Saturday afternoon. Nothing dramatic, just replacing a section that had come loose over the winter before I moved in. It was maybe 3 in the afternoon, good light, nothing about the day that suggested I should be anywhere other than where I was. The wood knocks started about 20 minutes into the job. 3 of them from somewhere deep in the tree line, each one louder than the one before it. I had never heard wood knocking before in person, and I remember my first thought was that someone was doing construction work somewhere on the other side of the tree line. That thought lasted about 4 seconds, because the second knock was closer than the first, and the third one was closer still, and whatever was making that sound was not on the other side of anything. It was moving toward me through the trees, and it was not trying to be quiet about it. Then the tree line erupted. That is the only word I have for it. Something moved through the trees parallel to where I was standing, and it covered the full length of my fence line in maybe 8 seconds. I could hear branches the size of my forearm snapping clean off as it went. I could feel the footfalls coming up through the ground into the soles of my boots. It never came out of the trees and it never showed itself, but it did not need to because the message was loud enough without a visual aid. I had been out here long enough, and I needed to wrap that up now. I put my tools down slowly, picked up my truck keys, and walked back to the house. I did not run, not because I was calm. I was not calm, but because somewhere in the back of my head, I had the very strong feeling that running was exactly the wrong thing to do. I showed the footage to a buddy from work the following week. 3 months of clips, the territorial markers, the whole thing laid out in order. He watched it for about 10 minutes and then told me I should look into getting a game warden out there. I asked him if he had actually watched what I just showed him. He said he had, and that it was probably a bear. I stopped showing people the footage after that, for a while anyway. I did not sleep well that November, so I spent a lot of nights at my kitchen table going down research holes. The thing that stopped me first was the Sierra Sounds, recordings made in the California wilderness in the 1970s of vocalizations that a retired Navy cryptolinguist named R. Scott Nelson formally analyzed and concluded showed the structural characteristics of a real language. Not human, not any known animal. I put my headphones on and listened to it alone in my kitchen at 2 in the morning, and I am not going to pretend that was a comfortable experience. Then I found something called infrasound, and everything I had felt in October suddenly had a name. It is sound at frequencies below what human ears can consciously hear, and the effect on people nearby is a feeling of dread with no obvious source. I read that and went completely still, because that was exactly what I had felt during the first encounter. That pressure in my chest that I could not explain. It had been communicating with me since October, and I had not even known there was a message being sent. I did a full walk of the property boundary one morning and started noticing things I had either missed before or that had not been there before. I am still not sure which. Specific trees along the eastern boundary had their bark stripped in deliberate patterns at a consistent height, around 8 feet up, the same height as the snapped trees from September. Large rocks that had no business being that far from the creek had been repositioned along the edge of the cleared zone, placed at intervals that were too consistent to be accidental. And the section of fence line I had been repairing when the wood knock started had been pulled apart again, not broken, pulled. The posts worked loose from the ground and moved aside at the exact point where the fence crossed the corridor route. I walked the full boundary and took photographs of everything, and when I got back to the house and looked through them all together, the message was pretty clear. This is where your land ends. This is where ours begins. The fact that my deed said otherwise was apparently not a compelling argument. After finding those markers, I wanted to know how far the corridor actually extended beyond my property. So I spent a few days walking the creek line in both directions past my boundary. I talked to 2 neighbors whose land bordered mine on the north and south ends and asked them casually if they had noticed anything unusual in the woods. One of them looked at me for a long moment before he said anything, and then just told me he did not go past the creek anymore and changed the subject. The other one had not been on his back acreage in over a year, and when I asked why, he said the dogs refused to go back there. I kept walking the creek line on my own after that. The corridor did not start at my property, and it did not end there either. It ran continuously in both directions as far as I followed it. Same signs, same stripped bark at the same height, same repositioned rocks marking the edges. My fence, my survey markers, my property lines meant absolutely nothing to whatever was using this route. Those boundaries were a human idea, and this thing had been here long before humans in this county had started drawing lines on maps and arguing about who owned what. I remember standing at my northern property marker, this little orange stake in the ground that I had paid a surveyor $400 to put there, and thinking that it was probably the most meaningless $400 I had ever spent. I found the first one on a Monday morning in December 2015, a full-grown deer at the edge of the cleared zone, right where the corridor met the boundary I had disturbed. It had not been killed there. The ground around it was not disturbed enough for that, and there was barely any predation damage on it. It had been carried there and set down in that specific spot, deliberately, and I already knew by December what was large enough and strong enough to do that on my property. What I did not know was why. 2 weeks later, there was a second one at the same spot, same careful placement, same minimal damage, and this time beside it, pressed into the soft ground, was a handprint, 4 fingers and a thumb, the palm roughly twice the width of mine. I put my own hand next to it and looked at the size difference for a while. Something that leaves a print that size had just carried a full-grown deer across my property and placed it at the edge of my cleared zone like it was making a point. And I think that is exactly what it was doing. It was not a gift, and it was not a coincidence. It was a demonstration. It was showing me what it was capable of carrying, how close it had been to my property line, and how little my cleared zone meant as a boundary to something that size. Up until January 2016, everything had been happening at the tree line. The encounters, the markers, the carcasses, all of it out there at the eastern boundary. That changed on a Wednesday night in January. I woke up at 2 a.m. to my dogs standing frozen in the middle of the bedroom, hackles up, staring at the back wall. Then I felt it, a pressure transferring through the exterior of the house, moving slowly from one end of the back wall to the other, like something running its hand along the outside of my house in the dark. I got my rifle and sat in the corner chair until sunrise. The porch cameras caught the bottom 20 inches of it, passing each lens as it made one full circle around the house and walked back toward the tree line. I watched that footage in the morning and understood that everything before this had been a warning. This was something else entirely. I drove to my neighbor's property that same morning, the one who had told me early on that he did not go past the creek anymore. I showed him the porch camera footage on my phone and watched his face while he watched it. He handed my phone back and told me he did not want to be involved. That was the last time I tried to tell anyone about what was happening on this property. After the night it circled the house, I started looking into who had owned this property before me. It took me about a week to track down the man who had sold it, an older farmer who had moved 3 counties away and did not have much of an online presence. I found a phone number through the county records, and I called him on a Tuesday afternoon. He picked up on the 3rd ring. When I told him why I was calling, he was quiet for a long time before he said anything. Long enough that I checked my phone to see if the call had dropped. Then he started talking, and he did not stop for almost an hour. He had experienced everything I had experienced, and then some. The footage, the wood knocks, the territorial markers, the carcasses. It had come to his house too, and he told me that when it did, it had not stopped at the wall the way it had with me. He would not go into detail about what happened after that. What he did say was that he had his family packed and out of that house in under a week, and that he had not driven past the county line since. Before he hung up, he said one thing that I have thought about every day since. He said he was sorry he had not left a note. After that phone call, I went back into the county records and started looking at the ownership history of this specific parcel of land. What I found was a pattern that was hard to look at once I saw it. Nobody stayed long. The tenures were short, some of them less than a year, and they went back further than I expected. Every few years, the land changed hands quietly, with no real explanation in any document I could find. I managed to track down 2 other previous owners besides the farmer. One was a woman who simply said she did not want to talk about it and hung up. The other was a man who stayed on the phone long enough to tell me that whatever I was dealing with out there had been going on for as long as anyone in that county could remember, and that the smart move was to sell while I still felt like it was my idea. Every encounter up to this point had been at dusk or in the dark. That changed on a Saturday morning in February 2016. I was in my backyard drinking coffee and looking at a section of roof that needed attention when I looked up and it was standing at the edge of the yard 40 feet away in full daylight. This was the first time I had seen it clearly, not through a camera lens, not in failing light. 40 feet away in the middle of a Saturday morning, and I could see everything, the full height of it, somewhere around 8 feet, the width of the shoulders, the way it held itself with a stillness that felt more like patience than anything else. It looked at me, then it turned its head slowly toward the house, then back to me. It did this twice, and then it just stood there and waited. I understood what it was saying without needing it explained. After everything since September 2015, the message was clear enough. Make a decision. Because as far as it was concerned, I was the problem, and the problem was still standing in its yard drinking coffee. I am not going to pretend the daylight encounter did not get to me, because it did. That night I packed a bag, put it by the door, and sat in my truck in the driveway at 4 a.m. with the engine running. I had built this house with my own hands and put everything I had into this land, and I sat there in the dark, running the numbers on whether any of that was still worth what was happening. I thought about what the previous owner had said on the phone, that the people who left did not stop being afraid. They just moved their fear somewhere smaller. I sat with that for a while. Then I turned the engine off, went back inside, and put the bag in the closet. I decided I was not leaving, so I stood there and I took it, two of them screaming from the dark on either side of me, and then I took one step back, then another. I kept my eyes on the tree line and kept stepping back slowly, 1 foot at a time, all the way across the property until I hit the porch steps. I went inside and locked the door and went straight to the window that faces the eastern tree line. I stood there in the dark of my own living room looking out at the woods for a long time. I could not see anything, but the screaming had stopped the moment I reached the porch, and that told me enough about how closely it had been watching me walk back. It was just standing there 20 feet away watching me, and it was holding something at its side, a dead animal hanging from one hand while it stood completely still and watched me the entire time, just holding it there like it was the most normal thing in the world. And the screaming from the tree line, the thing I had spent the whole night focused on, that had just been the thing it wanted me looking at, while this one walked out of the woods and stood 20 feet away with a bloody carcass in its hand. That is not random behavior. Every encounter had been a step, and every interaction had been a question. Does he run? Does he panic? Does he stop coming out here? And the answer every single time had been no. I had stood my ground through the wood knocks and the carcasses and the house and the screaming, and I had done it without fully understanding that standing my ground was exactly what was being measured. It had spent 7 months deciding whether I was worth tolerating on this land. The final encounter answered that question in a way I was not expecting. Late March 2016. I was standing at the edge of the cleared zone at dusk when I heard it coming through the tree line before I saw it. Branches snapping, ground shaking, and then it walked out and stopped 10 feet away from me. 10 feet. I have been scared before in these woods. Not like that. I could hear it breathing. My rifle was back at the house, and I already knew that was a problem. Then the infrasound hit harder than it ever had before. It went through my chest, my legs, my hands. Everything in me said run, and I could not move. And then it opened its mouth. It built in my chest before I heard it with my ears, and when it finally came out, it was one word, rough and wrong, but clear enough that there was no question about what it said. Leave. My legs were shaking when I walked back to the house. I thought about the previous owner. I thought about every person whose name was on that deed before mine, and what they each decided when they got to this same point. I built this house with my own hands, and I was not going to let anything run me off it. I understood what I had disturbed, and I was not going to clear any more trees. That felt like the fairest thing I could offer. For 7 months, my trail cameras recorded Bigfoot on my property, and nobody believed me. I am still here, and so is it. The gate is already bent when the GoPro flicks on. The heavy steel crossbar pushed outward from the inside, bowing away from the road, like something enormous had pressed against it until the metal gave way. The cyclist barely slowed. The camera catches the gate in wide angle as he squeezes past the gap, and then he's through, and the logging road swallows him whole. The cyclist pumps hard up the first short rise, breathing loud over the wind noise, and for a moment, everything is exactly what it looks like. A guy on a bike, a closed road, some poor lighting decision. Then the camera catches the tree line on the right. There is something standing in the trees. It is not a stump. Stumps don't have shoulders. The shape is massive, easily 7.5 feet tall, and it is standing perfectly still between two pine trunks about 60 feet off the road, partially screened by brush, watching. The cyclist doesn't see it, but the GoPro does. For 4 full seconds as the bike crests the rise, the shape is visible in the right edge of the frame, dark, upright, wide across the chest, in a way that no deer or bear or trick of shadow can account. Then the camera angle shifts as the road descends, and the shape is gone from frame. That is Bigfoot, and Bigfoot is already watching. The first mile of the road is wrong in a way that takes a moment to name. It's too quiet. The only sounds on the audio track are the cyclist's tires grinding gravel, his breathing, and the soft mechanical click of the drivetrain. Then the branches start snapping. The snapping comes from the right side of the trail, deep in the trees, and it comes in a rhythm, crack, pause, that matches the cadence of the bike exactly. When the cyclist accelerates, the snapping accelerates. When he coasts, it slows. He doesn't notice it at first. The camera picks it up before he does, because the audio is more honest than a person moving fast through darkening woods. For 30 seconds, 40 seconds. The bicycle and the forest keep the same beat. Something in those trees is pacing him. Bigfoot is not running. Bigfoot is not rushing. Bigfoot is walking, long and unhurried, keeping time with a man on a bicycle, the way a cat tracks a mouse across a room, not closing in, not falling back, just maintaining the exact distance it chooses to maintain. That detail is the most frightening thing on the footage so far. Not the size of the shape in the tree line, not the way it stood so perfectly still, the fact that it is matching his speed at a walk. The cyclist hears it finally. He pumps harder. The sound in the trees pumps harder too. He glances right, and for half a second, the camera catches a dark mass moving through the brush, not a flash of fur, not a scramble. Movement that is controlled and deliberate, and too large to be anything the cyclist could name and stay comfortable about. He looks back at the road. He pedals harder. The snapping in the trees falls back into rhythm. There are trees snapped clean at chest height on the bend, not blown down. Snap the way you snap a pencil. The brakes fresh and pale and raw. Sap still beating on the exposed wood. 6 of them in a rough line, all leaning the same direction, toward the road. Whatever moved through here was walking, and whatever it was tall enough that chest height for it is 7 feet off the ground, and strong enough that pine trunks 4 inches across gave way without drama. The cyclist stops pedaling for 3 seconds. The camera bobs as the bike slows, and in that brief hesitation, the tree line on the left side of the road opens up, a gap between 2 large firs maybe 40 feet in, and Bigfoot is visible there, not hiding anymore, and it's walking. Bigfoot is moving left to right through the gap at a steady, upright pace, arms swinging, covering ground in strides so long they barely look like effort. The creature is in frame for less than a second, but the footage is clear enough. Bipedal, enormous, dark, and completely unbothered by the man on the road 20 feet away. It walks through the gap and the trees close behind it like a curtain falling. And then it's gone. The cyclist has seen it now. The camera catches his panic. The handlebars jerking left, then correcting, the front wheels skidding a half inch in the gravel, and he is pedaling again, hard, his breathing spiking on the audio, legs churning, but the road ahead narrows. The gravel turns uneven, chunks of loose stone and embedded rock jutting up through the packed surface, and the bike bucks and shimmies under him, slowing him even as he pushes harder. He can't hold speed on this surface. The road is fighting him. Behind him, through the gap in the trees he just passed, Bigfoot does not break into a run. The audio catches the first clear sound of it, a heavy, rhythmic impact on soft earth, the sound of something massive covering ground in long, controlled strides. It's walking faster, the strides lengthening until the time between impacts stretches and the sound deepens, each footfall hitting the ground like a thrown sandbag. The gap between each strike is enormous, a stride that must be 5 feet, maybe 6, and it is closing distance without raising its pace above a casual walk. The cyclist glances back. The camera follows the motion and catches the fog line 60 yards behind, a low ground fog rolling in off the hillside, soft and white, already thick enough to have visibility. At the edge of that fog, Bigfoot has moved to the tree line right alongside the road and is tracking parallel through the brush, not on the road surface, but in the narrow strip of undergrowth between the gravel shoulder and the forest proper. It is visible in the frame for 2, 3, 4 seconds, a dark vertical shape moving steadily through the gray-white fog, never quite stepping onto the road, never falling back into the trees. Just there, on the edge, matching every turn. The cyclist tries weaving. He cuts the bike hard left, then right, then left again, breaking his straight-line path and putting trees between himself and the shape in the fog. It's a reasonable instinct. It doesn't work. Bigfoot adapts inside a single stride. The shape in the trees vanishes from one gap and reappears at the next, having shifted its angle through the forest with a fluency that makes the cyclist's weaving look like it's being predicted rather than followed. The creature is moving through the forest on its own route, a route that runs parallel to the road, but intersects with it at every opening, every gap, every place where the tree line breaks for more than 2 feet. It is not following the cyclist's path, it is charting a better one. The cyclist cuts right toward the tree line, trying to break whatever line of sight Bigfoot is using. The camera catches branches whipping past the lens, a brief plunge into the shadow under the pines, and then the road again as he corrects. In that half second in the trees, there is a sound on the audio, a low, resonant exhale, close enough to distort the microphone slightly. Not a growl nor a scream, just breath, enormous and controlled, from something that was exactly where the cyclist rode. He gets back on the road and pedals faster than he has since the gate. It's do or die time. The road drops, not gradually, it tips over like a table edge and becomes steep, wet stone beneath the gravel. the surface slick with moisture that has seeped up through the roadbed from the hillside. The cyclist's tires lose grip on the first pedal stroke of the descent, and he stops pedaling entirely, feathering his brakes, the wheels skipping and chattering on the stone. He's going fast now without trying, the grade pushing him harder than his legs could, the bike shimmying under him as the tires hunt for traction. The camera swings back. Bigfoot is at the top of the slope. It is standing at the crest of the hill, fully visible against the darkening sky, and it is looking down the road, then moves, not down the road, into the trees on the left side, disappearing from view at the top of the frame. The cyclist faces forward again, fighting the bike through a wet curve, rear wheel sliding 3 inches before biting. When the road straightens for a moment and the camera can see 50 yards ahead, Bigfoot is already there, halfway down the slope, emerging from the tree line on the right side of the road, having come down through the forest on a line that cut the switchback entirely. The hill that is slowing the cyclist down and threatening to throw him off his bike is, for Bigfoot, nothing. The creature used the terrain, rather than fighting it, dropping through the forest on a direct line while the road curved and doubled back. This is not luck. This is not a shortcut stumbled onto. This is something that knows this hill, knows where the road goes, and is using that knowledge to get ahead of the man on the bicycle. The cyclist realizes it at the same moment the camera shows it. His breathing changes on the audio, not faster, but different, a sharp inhale and a held breath that signals the specific kind of fear that comes with understanding rather than surprise. He is being herded. The hill ends in a flat, and Bigfoot is already at the bottom, and there is nowhere to go but forward. The fog at the base of the hill is not the same as the ground fog from before. This is a wall, white and dense and vertical, dropping visibility to 10 feet, maybe less. The cyclist hits it at speed, and the camera turns white. Everything disappears. The road, the tree line, the sky, all of it replaced by a flat, featureless white that the GoPro's exposure system can't parse. For 2 full seconds, there is nothing but fog and the sound of tires on gravel and the cyclist's breathing. Then Bigfoot is in the fog with him. The shape appears in the white, not a silhouette against brightness, but a darker density within the fog itself, a place where the whiteness is thicker and darker at the same time, moving without sound. It is 10 feet to the left, then 12 feet ahead. Then the fog shifts, and it is just a shapeless mass of dark moving through the white, its outline breaking apart and reforming with each gust that stirs the fog layer. No footsteps. The ground here is soft, wet pine duff soaked through with moisture, and Bigfoot's footfalls make no sound that carries over the cycling noise. The cyclist brakes, the tires lock and slide, and the bike goes sideways, and the camera tilts hard to the right before he catches it. He puts a foot down and stops, standing astride the bike in the fog, and the audio goes very quiet, just his breathing, just the distant sound of water somewhere on the hillside. And then, very close, 8 feet, maybe less, a sound that is not wind and not water and not any animal sound the microphone has captured yet. A sound like air being displaced by something large and slow. The soft percussion of movement, too controlled to be accidental and too close to be safe. Bigfoot is right there. The cyclist doesn't wait for a visual. He drops the bike. The audio catches the clatter of aluminum on gravel, and he runs. The camera shakes so badly for the next 40 seconds that individual frames are nearly unusable, but the audio is continuous, and the blur of motion is consistent. He is in the trees. Branches snap across the lens, a bright flare as a thin branch catches the light, then shadow, then another branch. His footsteps on the forest floor are soft, wet needles, soft soil, and his breathing is ragged now, not the controlled effort of a hard climb, but the open-mouthed gasp of someone running as hard as their legs will carry them through darkness. Behind him, Bigfoot is in the trees too. The sound of it is not frantic. That is the part that the audio captures most clearly in the moments when the cyclist slows enough that his own footsteps stop masking the world around him. There is no crashing, no blind thrashing through undergrowth. There is the sound of large things bending, branches and saplings flexing under pressure and snapping back, but it is a rhythmic, controlled sound. Bigfoot is moving through the forest the way water moves through a landscape, not fighting the terrain, using it, taking the path of least resistance that also happens to be faster than the path the cyclist is on. The cyclist cuts right. Bigfoot is already there, a sound of heavy impact on the ground somewhere to the right that is close enough to redirect him without a visual. He cuts left. The same thing happens. Bigfoot is cutting angles, staying in front of each direction. The cyclist chooses the moment he chooses it, appearing on the right when he goes right, on the left when he goes left, as if it can see where the turn will end before the turn begins. The net effect is that the cyclist keeps moving in the same direction, pushed forward by the sound of something he cannot outmaneuver. The forest floor drops away and the camera catches a streak of dim sky, a ravine 5 feet across, spanned by a fallen log, maybe a foot in diameter. The log is old bark sloughing off in strips, pale and damp in the last gray light. The cyclist hits it running and doesn't stop, jumping onto the log and running across it with his arms out, balancing by instinct over the 7-foot drop to dry stone below. He is halfway across when he sees Bigfoot on the other side. Bigfoot is standing at the far end of the log on the bank above the ravine, and it got there faster than a man running flat out through open ground. The camera catches it clearly for the first time without fog or motion blur, fully upright, arms at its sides, watching the man on the log with something that the footage cannot interpret as anything other than patience. Just waiting, the way something waits when it knows it has already won the geometry of the situation. Then Bigfoot steps onto the log, 1 foot first, slow, the whole weight coming down deliberately, and the log flexes. The cyclist feels it. The camera bobs as the vibration travels, and he runs. There is nowhere to run except forward, past Bigfoot, but Bigfoot steps aside just enough. 1 step left, opening the bank, and the cyclist hits the far side and scrambles up the bank, clawing at roots, pulling himself over the edge with both hands. Behind him, the audio catches the log creaking under a load the cyclist's weight was nowhere near producing. Bigfoot crosses the ravine in 3 strides, balanced with no adjustment, no hesitation, the way you walk a floor you have walked 1,000 times. The cyclist runs uphill. The embankment ahead is steep, 40 degrees maybe, exposed root systems poking out of the bare soil where rain has eaten the slope. The cyclist uses them like ladder rungs, grabbing and pulling, climbing hand over hand, while his feet scramble for purchase on the wet earth. It's slow going. It is, for a human, as fast as it gets. Bigfoot does not climb the same way. The camera catches it from below and behind as the cyclist crests the embankment, 2 massive hands driving into the earth, fingers splaying and gripping, and then a pull that lifts the entire body in a single lurch. Bigfoot is not climbing the slope so much as refusing to be stopped by it, driving itself upward by the sheer application of strength against dirt. The cyclist reaches the top and rolls over the edge onto flat ground, and Bigfoot is already there. It's standing on flat ground, having come up a different face of the hill, a faster route through the forest that the camera never captured because it was behind the cyclist, and now it is in front of him again, 10 feet away on the edge of the ridge, outlined against the sky. The cyclist turns and runs along the ridge. The conservation fence appears out of nowhere, a 6-foot chain link fence, old, the posts rusted orange, running perpendicular to his path and cutting off the ridge. The cyclist hits it at speed and doesn't slow, one hand grabbing the chain link and his feet finding the mesh, and he is over the top in 5 seconds, landing hard on the far side and staggering but staying upright. He does not hear Bigfoot hit the fence. Instead, he hears the fence coming down, a single sharp metallic shriek as a steel post pulls out of the ground, the chain link buckling in a wave, and then the sound of a section of fence folding flat. The camera catches it over his shoulder as he runs, Bigfoot stepping through a 6-foot gap in the chain link where 2 posts have simply given way. The mesh hanging in folds, the creature not slowing, not acknowledging the fence as an obstacle any more than a man acknowledges a wet paper bag on the floor. He runs along the fence line, using it as a wall on his right. The logic is simple. The fence is a barrier, and if Bigfoot is on the other side, the fence buys distant. The camera tracks the fence post ticking past, regular as a metronome, and for 50 yards, the only sound is his footsteps and his breathing, and the distant creak of settling metal behind him. Then, the fence starts moving. On the other side of the chain link, Bigfoot is using the fence the way the cyclist is, as a guide, a straight line to follow, a landmark in the dark forest. Bigfoot's shadow is visible through the mesh in the places where the tree cover breaks enough to let in the last gray skylight, moving parallel, matching stride for stride. The fence that was supposed to be a barrier is now a channel, and Bigfoot is on one side, and the cyclist is on the other, and they are running the same line. He leaves the fence and dives into the darkness of the forest. The drainage channel is concrete, a rectangular culvert about 4 feet wide and 5 feet deep, built to carry runoff down the hillside, bone dry in the late summer, but smelling of wet stone and rot. The cyclist drops into it feet first, the camera catching the gray walls rising around him, and starts running. It is, in the moment, logical, a concrete channel with no loose loose footing, no branches, no obstacles, the fastest path he has found since leaving the road. The footsteps behind him arrive in the channel and become something else entirely. Concrete channels are echo chambers. Each of Bigfoot's footfalls, that heavy, deliberate impact, that sandbag on earth sound, bounces off the walls and doubles back and then doubles back again, so that the sound of one pursuing creature fills the channel the way thunder fills a narrow valley. The audio on the footage clips, the microphone can't handle it, and the cyclist's own footsteps are completely buried under the reverberating weight of what is behind him. The channel walls are rising on both sides, the concrete damp and gray, and the sky above is a narrow strip dark purple, barely visible at the top of the channel's open sides. The channel fork, a Y junction, the main channel continuing straight and a narrower branch cutting left maybe 2 feet wide. The cyclist takes the narrow branch without slowing, turning left and scraping his shoulder on the junction corner, the camera catching a brief flash of concrete rushing past too close. And then he is in the narrow channel, arms brushing both walls. Bigfoot takes neither branch. The audio catches the grunt first, low, chest deep, the sound of massive effort, and then the camera catches the junction behind him. Bigfoot has vaulted over the concrete divider wall rather than choosing either channel, landing ahead of the fork on the far side, blocking the main channel and forcing the narrow branch. The creature landed in exactly the place that eliminates the most options. The narrow channel spits him out onto a gravel slope, and the cyclist scrambles up it, clawing at the rock, and emerges back onto what was once a road, narrower than the logging road, barely a track, running along the edge of a cliff face with nothing on the right but a 70-foot drop and scrub pine below. His bike is there. Somehow, through the weaving and the trees and the channel and the ravine, the bicycle has ended up here, lying on its side in the gravel. The GoPro's twin obviously mounted to the handlebars, still running and capturing a different angle on the same scene. The cyclist's feet, the gravel, and behind him, emerging from the channel, the lower half of something enormous. He grabs the bike without stopping. He is on it and moving in 3 seconds. The cliff road is the fastest surface since the logging road, the gravel packed and even, and the cyclist uses every inch of it, driving hard into the pedals and letting the bike accelerate below him. The camera angle from the handlebar mount catches the road rushing past in a blur of gray, the cliff face close on the left, the drop close on the right, and the audio fills with wind noise and tire roar. On the slope below the cliff road, through the scrub pine and loose rock, Bigfoot is keeping pace. Not on the road, below it, on terrain that should make pace impossible. Loose shale, 40-degree incline, scrub brush thick enough that a person would have to fight through it. Bigfoot is not fighting through it. Branches explode outward as the creature hits them, not bending, not parting, but snapping and scattering, and the sound carries up to the road and bursts like something hitting a chain-link fence with a bat. The slope is trying to pull the creature down, and the creature is ignoring the slope, moving across it at road speed through pure physics-defying insistence. The cyclist's speed no longer matters. That is the information the cliff road is delivering. Whatever speed the bicycle can achieve on this surface, Bigfoot matches it from terrain, where matching that speed should be impossible. It is not a question of who is faster. It is a question of who owns the terrain, and the terrain belongs to something that treats loose shale on a 40-degree slope as a minor inconvenience. He reaches for his brakes as the road narrows, too narrow to ride. The path ahead squeezes to 2 feet wide, the cliff face brushing the handlebars on the left, and he has to slow and pick his way through, the bike wobbling, his knees brushing stone. Below him, through a gap in the scrub, Bigfoot is visible for 1 clear second, directly below, looking up, its face turned toward the cyclist on the cliff road 30 feet above with an expression the camera cannot read and does not need to. Then the scrub closes over it and the sound of branches continues below, moving forward. He triggers the rocks accidentally. His front wheel clips a loose section of the road edge and a cascade of stone goes over the side. A dozen rock, some of them the size of his head, bouncing down the cliff face in a clatter of impact, each one louder than the last as they accelerate. A logical next action. More rock, on purpose, pushed over the edge with his foot. 3, 4, 5. A small rock slide dropping into the scrub below where the sounds of movement are loudest. The rock slide sounds like something large breaking. The scrub rustles violently as debris impacts it. The movement sounds below stop for exactly 1 second. Then they continue. Bigfoot emerges from the bottom of the rockfall zone, still moving forward, still at pace, the debris having done nothing measurable. The sound of its movement is unchanged. The only difference is that a few seconds have passed. The cliff road ends and the forest opens into a straight corridor. 2 rows of dense fir trees, old growth, their trunks 2 feet across, spaced close enough that only the corridor between them is navigable. It runs straight for maybe 150 yards. At the end of it, the trees thin, and there is a shape against the lighter dark of an open sky. A building, a road, something that means other people. The cyclist sees it and accelerates. Everything left in his legs, everything left in his lungs, going into the 150 yards between him and the end of the corridor. Bigfoot steps out of the trees at the far end of the corridor before the cyclist is halfway down it, not charging, just there. Standing in the corridor's exit, filling it with its width, looking down the 75 yards of open space at the man sprinting toward it. Then it moves, not to close the distance, but sideways, one step back into the trees, not blocking the exit anymore, just present at the edge of it, like the chase is not over, like the chase is still being offered to continue. The cyclist doesn't slow down. He makes the choice in a half second and goes for the corridor exit straight at where Bigfoot just was, banking on the gap. The camera catches the tree trunks flashing past, the exit rushing up the dark edge where the corridor opens, and he is through, and the building is ahead, and he is still running. There is a concrete culvert under the road, not a large one, a drainage pipe, maybe 3 feet in diameter, the opening dark and low, running under the road grade at road level. He sees it, and he goes for it the way drowning people go for anything they can reach. He goes in head first. The camera stabilizes for the first time in 40 minutes. The culvert is round, concrete, cold. The cyclist has pushed himself in up to his hips, his upper body and the GoPro inside the pipe, and the world in the footage is reduced to a circle of concrete tube with a dim ring of sky visible at the far end, maybe 20 yards away. His breathing fills the pipe, bouncing off the walls, and his heartbeat is audible on the audio as a rhythmic distortion in the microphone. Nothing is moving for 3 seconds, 4 seconds, the footage is still, and the audio is just breath and pulse. Then Bigfoot arrives at the entrance. The circle of dark sky at the entrance shrinks. Bigfoot is crouching at the opening, and the shape of it fills the frame. Shoulders wider than the culvert opening, the creature having to duck its head and angle sideways just to bring its face to the entrance. The darkness from outside flows into the pipe, and the footage goes to near black, the GoPro adjusting desperately for the new light level. What the camera can see, a mass of dark, details lost in the adjustment. Bigfoot is not trying to fit through the pipe. The pipe is too narrow by a foot on each side. The creature knows this. It is crouching at the entrance the way you crouch at a mouse hole, not trying to go in, knowing it doesn't need to. One arm enters the culvert. It comes in slowly, not a grab, an extension, the arm moving forward at a pace that has nothing urgent about it, nothing frantic. The hand is enormous, the fingers spread slightly, and it is dark enough that the camera only catches it in detail when the knuckles brush the concrete sides of the pipe. Left side, a soft scrape of contact, and the arm adjusts, centering itself. It is not reaching blindly. It is placing itself deliberately, moving forward with the patience of something that knows exactly what is at the end of the pipe and is in no hurry, because hurry is not necessary. The cyclist screams. It is the first sound he has made that isn't breathing or the wordless grunting of physical effort. It echoes in the culvert like a gunshot in a bathroom, doubling and tripling off the concrete, and the hand pauses for exactly 1 second and then continues forward. The screaming stops. There is a sudden, violent shift in the camera angle, not a gradual motion, but an instantaneous jerk, the footage lurching from the interior of the pipe to a spinning view of concrete rushing past, and then open air, and then gravel. The sound on the audio is a single heavy impact and then nothing. The last image the GoPro captures is from where it has landed, on its side in the gravel above the culvert entrance. The road is empty. The culvert entrance is empty. The bicycle is lying on its side 20 feet away. The forest holds its silence. The footage ends. On June 4, 2026, I filmed the clearest Bigfoot sighting ever captured, and I nearly didn't make it back to show anyone. I was pinned between two of them with no signal, and the most mind-blowing footage sitting on my SD card. What happened on that ridge that morning is the most terrifying moment I've ever experienced. My name is Aaron Granger. I'm 43 years old and based in the Pacific Northwest. I've spent most of my adult life outdoors. For nearly 15 years, I worked in trail maintenance, starting before sunrise and spending long days alone in remote landscapes that most people only ever glimpse from a car window. These days, I spend my weekends doing wilderness photography. It's not a profession or a side business, it's simply how I reconnect with the places that have always felt like home. Most of my trips out there are forgettable in the best way. June 4th was the one where I found myself stuck on a ridge with Bigfoot, standing between me and my car, thinking this might genuinely be how it ends for me. The area I'd picked sits deep inside a stretch of old-growth Douglas fir in the Pacific Northwest that most people don't bother with. No maintained trails or markers, no cell reception past the first quarter mile. The kind of place where if something goes wrong, I know nobody's coming. I'd known about it from my trail work days. We skirted the edges of it occasionally, but never went in. The locals who knew the area didn't really talk about why they avoided it. They just did. I never pushed on that. I probably should have. A guy I used to work with on trail crews mentioned the area a few months earlier. He said the eastern ridge caught the morning light perfectly, and that he'd always wanted to photograph it, but never got around to it. That was enough to put the idea in my head. I picked a Thursday, set my alarm, and figured I'd be in and out before most people were even awake. Simple enough. I also came more prepared than usual for this one. A few days before, I'd driven out to the area to scout it and planted a trail camera on a tree upslope from the ridge, motion activated, running for days by the time Thursday came. I also packed my thermal monocular and clipped a GoPro to my bag. I wanted as many angles as possible. Not fear exactly, more like that nagging feeling you get when you're halfway down the road and suddenly can't remember whether you locked the front door. Nothing concrete, nothing I could point to, just a persistent sense that I'd forgotten something important. I packed my gear anyway and told myself it was nothing. I parked just off the logging road at around 3:50 that morning. The first thing I noticed was the cold, and I mean really cold. Not just the usual pre-dawn chill. This was June. It had no business being that temperature. Out of habit, I checked my phone. No signal, which was exactly what I expected. I geared up, switched on my headlamp, and started hiking in. The darkness felt different too. I've done plenty of pre-dawn shoots over the years, and normally there's something familiar about being out there before sunrise. The woods have their own rhythm. You hear insects, the occasional bird, branches moving in the wind. Even in the dark, it feels alive. That morning, none of that was there. The forest was quiet enough that I could hear my own footsteps echoing back through the trees. About 10 minutes in, I stopped and swept my headlamp across the trail. Actually, before that, I stopped at the trail camera first, checked the feed quickly. Still armed, still recording, nothing significant on it yet. I remounted it and kept moving. It had rained a couple of days earlier, and the soil was still soft enough to hold tracks clearly. I expected to see the usual signs of movement: deer, raccoons, maybe a coyote. There was nothing. I crouched down and looked more closely, thinking maybe I was missing something. But the trail was clean. No hoof prints, no paw prints, nothing that suggested an animal had passed through recently. That wasn't normal. In a stretch of forest like that, something is always moving, especially at night. Even if you don't see it, you see the evidence. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the ground, trying to come up with a reasonable explanation. Then I got back to my feet and kept walking. I should have turned around right then. I'd been on the trail for about 20 minutes when every sound around me stopped. Not gradually either. It wasn't like one bird went quiet and then another. It all vanished at once. If you've spent enough time in the woods, you learn to pay attention to things like that. Back when I was doing trail work, I learned that kind of silence usually means something large is nearby. The animals know before you do. I stopped where I was and listened. I raised the thermal monocular first. No point reaching for the main camera yet. There was no visible light to work with. I pointed it upslope and immediately picked up a heat signature. Large. Much larger than a deer, just sitting there in the thermal, stationary, about 80 yards up. My headlamp was still on. After a second, I clicked it off and stood there in the dark, waiting. I figured I'd hear something eventually, a branch snapping, movement in the brush, anything that would explain it. But nothing did. The silence didn't break. It just stayed there, pressing in from every direction. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. Still nothing. That's when I saw it. I continued watching through the thermal scope and noticed that the heat signature had started moving. It was upright, large, and appeared to be bipedal. The thermal imaging confirmed what my eyes still could not make out through the trees. There was movement in the tree line maybe 80 or 90 yards upslope from where I was standing. At first, it was just a shape slipping between the trunks. My eyes kept losing it and finding it again. I remember thinking it had to be a bear. A black bear can look surprisingly human in bad light. I've had them stand up on hind legs before. I've watched them move through brush at dawn when all you can really make out is a silhouette. But this wasn't doing what a bear does. It wasn't stopping to sniff. It wasn't weaving around obstacles or dropping down on all fours. It was covering ground in a straight line, moving between the trees with long, measured strides. I found myself trying to judge its height against the surrounding timber. Every time it passed a trunk, it seemed bigger than my brain wanted it to be. Then I thought maybe it was a person. But then, nobody should have been out there at that hour. Even if someone was, the nearest access point was miles away. I remember noticing how little of it I could actually see. The trees kept breaking up the outline. 1 second I'd catch a shoulder, or what looked like a shoulder, then a leg, then just darkness again. But every glimpse gave me the same impression: upright, broad, and far larger than anything I expected to find in those woods. I didn't move or make a sound. I just stood there staring into the trees, waiting for it to become something I could recognize. I don't know exactly when the decision clicked, but at some point my hands just went to the camera. I'd been shooting long exposures earlier that morning, so it was already set up for low light, high sensitivity, wide open aperture, everything tuned for the conditions. I switched it over to video, kept my movements slow, and pressed record. It was too dark, too far away, and the trees kept breaking up the outline. I figured the camera might catch details I was missing at the moment, so I kept recording. The GoPro on my bag had been running the whole session. I'd clipped it on before I left the car and hadn't thought about it since. It was pointed back behind me, passively capturing everything I couldn't see. I didn't realize how important that would turn out to be until much later. The sky was just starting to change by then, that deep blue-gray light you get maybe 20 minutes before sunrise. There was finally enough light filtering through the canopy to separate shapes from shadows. That's when it stepped out of the tree line. It was completely upright. The size of it stopped me cold. Even at that distance, something about its proportions felt wrong. What bothered me more was how still it was. When an animal freezes, it doesn't stay perfectly motionless. There's always some movement, a shift in weight, a turn of the head, something. This thing didn't seem to move at all. I tightened my grip on the camera and kept filming. Earlier in the session, I'd photographed a Douglas fir about 70 yards upslope. I knew that tree. I'd framed a shot around it maybe an hour before, and I had a decent sense of its height, somewhere around 14 feet tall. When the figure shifted slightly to the right, it passed directly beside that tree. And what was there? The proportions were all wrong. The arms hung too low, the shoulders were too wide for anything I've ever seen move on 2 legs. And the way it moved when it shifted, fluid, controlled, no wasted motion. Something that size should lumber. It didn't. It moved like it was completely comfortable in that body, in that terrain, in that dark. The thermal had already told me something was wrong with the size. Now my eyes were confirming it. 2 separate devices, same conclusion. I kept the camera on it and tried to find the explanation that made this make sense. I'm still looking. Most wild animals, the second they sense you, they're gone. That's just how it works. A deer, a bear, even a mountain lion. The moment they register a human presence that close, the instinct kicks in and they're out. I've never once had a large animal hold its ground for more than a few seconds when it knew I was there. This thing didn't move for 40 seconds. I know because the timestamp is right there on the footage. 40 seconds of it, just standing in that gray light, completely unbothered, not frozen in the way prey freezes, not sizing up an escape route, just present, aware, like it had decided this was exactly where it was going to be, and nothing about my being there changed that calculation. That's when it stopped feeling like a sighting. 40 seconds doesn't sound like much until you're standing in the dark counting every one of them, watching something that size make no move to leave. That's when it started feeling like something else entirely. Like I wasn't the one doing the observing. And then it turned, not away from me, toward me. The whole upper body rotated in my direction, slow, deliberate, no hesitation. And just like that, everything about this situation changed. Up until that moment, I'd been telling myself I was watching something that didn't know I was there, that I had the distance, the dark, the silence working in my favor, that as long as I didn't move, I was okay. That belief did not survive the turn, because the way it turned, there was no searching in it, no scanning the tree line, no trying to locate the source of a sound. It turned, and it was already looking directly at where I was standing, like it had known the whole time and had simply decided, at that moment, that it was done pretending otherwise. I didn't move. I don't think I breathed. The camera was still running, and some part of my brain was glad about that, because the rest of me had completely stopped functioning normally. Whatever this was, it was no longer something happening at a safe distance. It was looking at me. Then it started moving toward me. Not charging, not lunging, just walking, downslope in my direction, one deliberate step at a time. And I need you to understand something about what that feels like, because it's not what you'd imagine. You'd think the scariest version of this is something coming at you fast. It isn't. Fast at least makes sense. Fast is an animal reacting, a threat responding, something you can categorize. This was slow, unhurried, like it had already decided how this was going to go and saw no reason to rush. Every step it took closed the distance between us, and I could feel the weight of each one even from where I was standing. The ground doesn't lie. Something that size moving toward you has a presence that goes beyond what your eyes are telling you. You feel it in your chest. I still didn't move. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, and I overrode every single one of them because something deeper, something from 20 years of reading situations in the field, told me that running was the worst thing I could do right now. So I stood there, camera up, completely still, watching it close the distance between us, one slow, deliberate step at a time. It didn't stop. 50 yards, maybe less. That's where it stopped, close enough that I could hear it breathing. Not heavily, just the slow, steady rhythm of something completely at ease with the situation it was in. I was not at ease. I was standing completely still with a camera in my hands, trying to calculate whether 50 yards was a survivable distance if this went wrong. It stood there looking in my direction, and I had this feeling, I can't call it anything more than a feeling, that it had known exactly where I was from the moment I walked into that forest. Not from when I raised the camera, not from when the silence dropped. From the beginning, like my arrival hadn't been a surprise to it at all. I told myself I was projecting, that I was scared and reading intentions into behavior I didn't understand. But the feeling didn't go away. It just sat there the same way the figure was sitting there, patient, unbothered, completely in control of whatever this was. And that patience was the most frightening thing I'd encountered so far. That would change. That's when I heard it, behind me. Not upslope where the figure was standing, directly behind me. Movement in the undergrowth, deliberate, heavy, close. The kind of sound that takes about half a second to process and then hits you all at once when it does. I was not alone out there with one of these things. There were two of them. I didn't turn around. Every part of me wanted to, but I didn't, because turning my back on the figure in front of me felt like exactly the wrong move, and keeping my back to whatever was behind me felt just as wrong. So I just stood there, frozen between the two, staring straight ahead at the one I could see, while the one I couldn't see moved through the brush somewhere behind me. The GoPro on my bag was facing backward. It was capturing all of it. I didn't think about that in the moment. I was way past thinking about cameras, but whatever was moving through that undergrowth behind me, whatever was circling, whatever was deciding what to do next, it was all going onto that footage without me even knowing it. I was completely surrounded. At some point, my brain shifted out of pure panic and into something more like damage control. I started thinking about getting out, mapping the route back to the logging road in my head. The trail I'd come in on, the direction of the car, how long it had taken me to walk in. And that's when I realized the figure was standing directly on it, not near it, not beside it, on it. The only navigable route back through that terrain in the dark ran right through where it was positioned. I'd come up the slope from the left, the trail cut back down through the trees on the right, and somewhere in the middle of that was 8 or 9 feet of something that had just walked toward me and stopped. I didn't know if it was deliberate. I still don't know. But here's the thing. It didn't matter. Whether it had positioned itself there on purpose or whether it was coincidence, the result was the same. I had no clean way out. Going off trail in that terrain, in that darkness, with something else moving behind me, wasn't an option. Waiting for it to move wasn't guaranteed. And doing anything that might provoke a reaction from something that size, at that distance, with no help coming, that wasn't an option either. So I ran through my options, methodically, the way you do when panic isn't going to help you, and you know it. Running was out. Off trail in that darkness with uneven terrain, I didn't know well enough. I'd be on the ground in 30 seconds, and whatever was behind me wouldn't need to hurry. Calling out wasn't an option either. No signal, no one within range, and making noise felt like the worst possible idea given everything that was already happening. I thought about the car, 12 minutes away on a good day, moving fast on a known trail, the trail that was blocked. I thought about going wide, cutting through the trees and around the figure's position. But that meant moving directly through whatever was circling behind me, and I wasn't willing to do that. Every option I had carried real physical risk, every single one. And for the first time out there, for the first time in 20 years of solo trips into remote terrain, I genuinely didn't know if I was making it home. Not as a dramatic thought, just as a cold, practical assessment of the situation I was actually in. So I made the only decision that made any sense. I stayed completely still. I kept the camera up, and I waited. I don't know exactly how long it lasted. Time does something strange when you're that scared. My best estimate is somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes, but it felt like it existed outside of any normal measurement. The figure upslope didn't move. It just stayed on that trail, positioned exactly where it was, like it had all the time in the world. Maybe it did. What moved was everything else around me. The presence behind me didn't stay in one place. It shifted. Slowly, wide arcs through the undergrowth, moving from my left to my right and back again. Not charging, not retreating, circling, patient and deliberate in a way that felt less like animal behavior and more like something I didn't have a clean word for. Every time I thought it had stopped, I'd hear it again. A branch. A weight shift, something heavy placing one foot deliberately in front of the other, somewhere in the dark behind me. At one point, it moved close enough that I could hear the undergrowth parting. I have no idea how close that actually was. Close enough that I stopped breathing for a while, and through all of it, the forest stayed completely silent in every other way. No birds, no wind, nothing that wasn't directly connected to whatever was happening on that ridge. The whole place had cleared out and left me there alone with them, and the only sounds were the ones I didn't want to hear. Then, slowly, the movement behind me began to pull away. Not all at once. Gradually, the sounds grew quieter, more distant, and then they stopped. I didn't move. I didn't trust it. A few minutes after the sounds behind me went quiet, the figure moved. It didn't lunge, didn't charge. It just turned, the same slow, deliberate rotation it had done when it first faced me, and walked back into the tree line. 3, maybe 4 strides, and the forest swallowed it completely. No crash of branches, no sound of something fleeing. Just a controlled, unhurried exit, like it had somewhere else to be and had simply decided it was time. That's the part I keep coming back to. It didn't leave because I was scared of it. It didn't leave because something startled it, or because the light had changed, or because of anything I did. It left because it chose to, which means everything that came before, the approach, the positioning on the trail, the presence behind me, all of it, that was also a choice. I stood there staring at the spot where it had been for a long time after it disappeared. The forest was still completely silent. Nothing had come back. Nothing was moving. But I didn't feel clear. I didn't feel like it was over just because I couldn't see anything anymore. I don't know how long I stood there after it disappeared. Long enough that my legs started shaking. Not from cold, just from the delayed physical response to everything my body had been holding in for the past half hour. I kept listening. That was all I could do. Every few seconds I'd pick a direction and just focus on it. Upslope where the figure had been, behind me where the other one had circled, the tree line to my left, rotating through them slowly, waiting for a sound that would tell me one of them had come back. Nothing came. But here's the thing about silence after something like that. It doesn't feel the same as silence before it. Before, silence was just the absence of sound. After, it feels like something that could end at any moment, like it's conditional, like whatever is choosing to be quiet could choose differently. I gave it another few minutes. Then I made the decision to move, slowly, quietly, no sudden movements. I clicked my headlamp back on, kept the camera running, and started picking my way back down toward the trail. Every step felt loud. Every branch that shifted in the wind felt like a response, but nothing responded. I made it to the trail, and I started moving toward the car. I made it back to the trail and started moving toward the logging road. Steady pace, not running, because running still felt wrong. I kept my headlamp on and my eyes forward, and I told myself that the hard part was over. It wasn't. About 3 minutes into the walk, I heard it. Something moving through the trees to my right, parallel to the trail, matching my pace exactly. Not ahead of me, not behind me, beside me. Every time I took a step, it took a step. Every time I slowed, it slowed. I couldn't see it. The tree line was too dark and too dense, and whatever was in there wasn't giving me anything to look at. Just sound. Just the steady, deliberate rhythm of something that was keeping pace with me through the forest, like it was escorting me out. I didn't stop. Stopping felt like an invitation, so I just kept moving, kept my eyes on the trail ahead, and tried to control my breathing. It stayed with me the entire way out, every step of it. And then, right at the point where the trees ended and the logging road began, it stopped, just like that. The sound cut off the moment the forest did. I took 3 more steps onto the gravel, turned around, and looked back at the tree line. I couldn't see anything, but I knew something was there. It had walked me all the way to the edge and then just watched me leave. I got to the car, unlocked it, and got in. I didn't linger. I pulled the door shut, locked it, and sat there for a moment with the engine off, just listening. The tree line was maybe 20 feet from where I'd parked. I couldn't see anything in it, couldn't hear anything either. I started the engine and pulled out onto the logging road, kept the headlights on high the whole way out. I didn't stop, didn't look back, just drove until the logging road connected with the main road and kept going until I found a gas station with the lights still on. Pulled in, parked, and sat there for a few minutes before I felt like I could think straight. That was the first moment since before sunrise that I felt anything close to okay. And even then, okay is a strong word for it. I got home and sat down with the main camera footage that night. I wasn't ready to go through all of it. I just wanted to see what was actually on there. Whether the camera had caught what I thought it caught, or whether I'd been so rattled that my memory had filled in details that weren't real. It caught it, all of it. But that wasn't what stopped me cold. I was going through the early part of the recording before the figure stepped into the light, and I noticed something. In the footage, maybe 10 or 15 seconds before I raised the camera, the figure's head turns. Slightly, not dramatically, just a small rotation in my direction. I watched it 3 times to make sure I was seeing it right. And I was. It turned toward me before I raised the camera, before I made any movement at all, which means it wasn't reacting to me picking up the camera. It wasn't reacting to anything I did in that moment. It already knew exactly where I was. It had been tracking my position the whole time, and that small head turn was just the moment it stopped bothering to hide that fact. That detail didn't make it into my initial notes. I needed some time before I could think about what it actually meant. I went back 3 days later in daylight. I needed to see the area properly, and I needed to know if anything on the ground confirmed what I'd experienced. Large depressions in the soft soil upslope from where I'd been standing. Deep, spaced far apart, wider than my boot by a significant margin. Further up, a wide area of flattened vegetation pressed down in multiple layers. Not weather damage, something large returning to the same spot repeatedly over time. And 30 yards east of that, a sapling snapped clean at roughly 9 feet off the ground. No storm explanation. Clean break, like it hadn't taken much effort at all. I stood in the middle of all of it, and the conclusion wasn't complicated. This wasn't somewhere something had passed through once. This was somewhere something lived. The layered bedding site was what got to me most. Fresh impressions in soil I could explain as recent activity, but compressed vegetation in multiple layers takes time. That spot had been used repeatedly, over weeks at minimum, possibly much longer. Whatever I encountered up on that ridge hadn't wandered in from somewhere else that morning. It was home, and that means it was there before I arrived. It was there on the nights before Thursday. It was there when my trail camera was sitting on that tree, recording nothing but darkness, and then, apparently, something it hadn't been designed to catch clearly enough. It's still there now. That's the part that doesn't leave me. I drove home, I went back to my normal life, and whatever is living in that corridor kept doing exactly what it was doing before I showed up. I was the temporary one. I was the visitor. And the forest I've been treating as familiar territory my whole career. I'm not sure I know it as well as I thought I did. I didn't get to the GoPro footage until about a week later. I'd been putting it off. It had been facing backward the entire session. Everything behind me that I couldn't see while I was focused on the figure in front. The audio from when the second presence appeared is clear. Something large, circling, close. You can hear the direction shifting. You can hear it stop and start again. The walk back was what got me. I knew something had been pacing me through the trees. What I didn't know was how close. The GoPro puts it maybe 15, 20 feet into the tree line the entire way out, right there the whole time. And then, at the exact point where the forest meets the logging road, it stops. You can hear the gravel under my boots start and the forest go completely silent at the same moment. It walked me all the way to the edge, and the GoPro caught every step of it. I pulled the trail camera footage last. I almost didn't want to. It had triggered 11 times between midnight and 3:45 a.m., 15 minutes before I even parked. Something large had been moving through that corridor for hours before I arrived. By the time I walked in with my headlamp and my gear, whatever was up on that ridge had already been there most of the night. It wasn't passing through. It was already in position. I was the one who walked into it. When I put it all together, the trail camera timing, the figure on the trail, the second presence behind me, the GoPro audio, the unhurried exit, a pattern shows up that I can't dismiss. The trail camera shows it was already positioned up there before I arrived. The silence drop wasn't just a predator cue. It was the point where whatever was up there knew I was close enough. The figure came into view and held my attention forward while something else moved in behind me. The only trail out was blocked. And when they left on their own terms, at their own pace, with no urgency whatsoever. That's not random animal behavior. Every piece of it was coordinated. And the thing I keep coming back to, the thing I couldn't explain away no matter how hard I tried, is that it worked. I was completely controlled in that situation from the moment I walked in. I just didn't know it until it was already over. Right after the figure disappeared, before the forest sounds came back, I heard something. Low, resonant, felt in the chest more than heard with the ears. 2 seconds, then gone. I went back through the GoPro audio. It's there. I don't know what it means. I just know it's there on 2 separate records, and I'm done leaving it out. At the 12-second mark, the figure shifts its weight slightly, and the camera catches the musculature through the upper back and shoulders in a way that ends every costume argument. I've looked. A lot of people have looked. Nobody's found an explanation that holds up. I pulled the clearest frame from that moment and ran basic processing on it. What came back was a face, looking directly into the lens. That is the clearest Bigfoot sighting of June 2026. And the footage, there's no other word for it. It's mind-blowing, even to me. And I was there.